Chapter 1599. If the millions of people in the two provinces were willing to migrate, it would greatly increase the number of Han people in the other Yangtze provinces. It would also allow Han culture to spread to other foreign races faster, allowing the custom of Han people being respected to continue. Since they wanted the remaining people to have land to farm, where would the land come from? They would need to take advantage of the rich, which were the nobles and gentry. If there was no suitable reason before, the assassination of Yang Qindong by the three great clans of Yunnan was the best reason. For example, the deceased head of the Li clan, Li Jiayin, all of his assets were confiscated immediately. According to the statistics, Li Jiayin's family alone occupied thousands of hectares of fertile land, silver, and all kinds of goods, and shops amounted to 12 million taels of silver. When this harvest was reported to Yang Qindong, it gave him a fright. He had expected Li Jiayin to be rich, but he did not expect him to be so rich. Unfortunately, it was not desirable to hide wealth among the people. Those who were truly rich were misers. They only had themselves in their hearts, and they were even willing to betray their country and people for benefits. It was like the 8 great merchants of Shaanxi in the late Ming dynasty. They earned money from the Ming dynasty's government and the people, but in the end, they funded the enemy. It was because of this that a small slave had occupied all of China's rivers and mountains. Thinking about it, wasn't the last emperor of the Ming dynasty, Chongzhen, defeated because he had no money and no pay? The funny thing was that an emperor needed to borrow money from his officials, but in the end, there was no one he could borrow money from. He did not know how many good words he said, but in the end, he persuaded his father-in-law to lend him 30,000 taels of silver. It seemed like he had dug out his heart and cut his flesh. But in reality, when the roaming king entered the capital, he actually plundered more than 6 million taels of silver from the emperor's father-in-law's house. With so much money, the emperor only borrowed 1/20th of the money and cried to the heavens and the earth. In the end, he lost both his life and wealth. Presumably, when he was killed by the roaming king, he regretted it, right? No. Not necessarily. Some people were like this. They would not shed tears until they saw the coffin, and even if they saw the coffin, they would not shed tears. They regarded money as more important than the sky, even more important than their own lives. She really didn't know how such people's brains were developed and what they were thinking. Having said that, even if Yang Qindong knew that there was such a thing, he would never allow the same thing to happen in his Yang family, especially under his nose. For this reason, he had formulated a series of rules when Yang Xia was developing. For example, Yang Xia encouraged business, but the business tax was very heavy, reaching 7 out of 10. In other words, the merchants of Yang Xia had to pay a tax of 700 coins every time they made a profit. After deducting the expenses, only about 50 coins would fall into the hands of the merchants. By doing this, not only did it prevent some merchants from rising up, but it also filled the Yang Xia's treasury. Also, Yang Xia merchants were not allowed to be officials, not even within the 5 blessings. Once discovered, he would definitely be severely punished. At the very least, they would be stripped of their position and fined silver. At the very least, it would be possible for their entire family to be exterminated. Since ancient times, collusion between officials and merchants had always been a big problem, but it was unavoidable. Yang Qindong had set such a rule when he first created the rules. It was to prevent people from becoming too powerful under him. In the end, his descendants would also be under the control of others. Yang Qindong would never allow his descendants to borrow money from his officials one day. That would be too shameful, and it would be too much of a failure. Speaking of which, the matter of the Li family made Yang Qindong see the drawbacks of the great Ming dynasty. At the same time, he also began to deal with these people. For this reason, he specially formulated some rules for these officials and villagers. For example, ordinary people had the right to choose whether or not to migrate, or where to migrate to. However, these people did not have this right. Not only did they have to leave their homeland, but they also had to go to a place designated by Yang Xia. Whether they liked it or not, they had to do so. Otherwise, the soldiers of the 5-star army would teach them a lesson. Also, before migrating, they had to conduct an in-depth investigation. For example, what kind of person were they? Did they oppress the people? Did they have a murder case? If there was, then sorry, they would be punished according to how they should be punished. If they were involved in a criminal case, they would be sentenced according to how they should be sentenced. If they caused deep resentment, they would be beheaded. When this policy was announced, it really scared a lot of people. In particular, the two families, Qin Ingkang and Wang Shufu, were taken to the largest square in Yunnan Manor. A public denunciation meeting was held, allowing the people who had suffered from their sufferings to complain. The scene could really be described as earth-shattering, and it could even make ghosts weep. This was because all the people in the city who heard the news came. The feeling of being able to see the usually high and mighty dignitaries bow their heads in front of them was really too good. The grievance meeting and the complaint meeting were held for a day. Later, it was confirmed that Qin Ingkang was guilty of the most heinous crimes. He colluded with the government to rob people of their land, occupied real estate, and even killed 56 people. When the evidence was presented one by one, Beta Persei announced on behalf of Yang Chendong that he would be executed on the spot, and his head would be chopped off in the square. As for the other members of the Qin family, they were also sentenced for their crimes. Some were beheaded, and some were sentenced to 3 to 30 years in prison. This really shocked a lot of people. When they saw that Bugnam of Gojoseon was serious, the people cheered, while the dignitaries were pale. Those villagers who were usually good people were better off. At the very least, those who had a habit of deceiving the common people directly fainted. The people ran around to spread the news. They had taken revenge, and they were finally the masters. The next day, it was Wang Shufu's Wang family's turn. In contrast, Wang Shufu was usually reasonable. At least, he had not personally killed anyone. There were a few bastards in his family who were found to have been sentenced to a corresponding term after being found out. As for him, he was returned home without any charges. Only 90% of his family's property was confiscated, and he was allowed to take the remaining 10% and move to other provinces designated by Yang Xie. This combination of punches was really just rewards and punishments. Seeing that the Wang family was fine, some people were relieved. At this point, the dignitaries that had troubled the Great Ming dynasty for many years were easily dealt with by Yang Chendong. This was because Yang Chendong was ruthless enough. In addition, he was the founder and had the power that no one could restrict, so he dared to do this. If his son wanted to do this, it would be very difficult. However, once the news spread, it would inevitably lead to conflicts between the dignitaries and the dignitaries of other provinces. When Yao Yingjun told this to Yang Chendong, he chuckled and said, "It's fine. We didn't intend to reason with them anyway. As long as they enter my Yang Xie, they will either follow my rules or seek their own deaths. There is no third choice. Don't worry, they know what to choose." Yang Chendong had this confidence. Facts also proved that in the Han territory occupied by the Yang family in the future, although the dignitaries and squires there offset each other in every way, in the end, they did not form a climate and threat. In the end, from opposition to compromise, and then to the habit of following. This proved that as long as one was ruthless, there was no problem that could not be solved. The most important thing was whether one dared to be ruthless and whether they could carry it out. After dealing with the matters of the Qin and Wang clans, Yang Chendong handed these trivial matters over to Yao Yingjun. Yao Yingjun had authority and an army. With Yao Yingjun's ability, dealing with these matters was a piece of cake. On the other hand, Yang Chendong's thoughts were on the matter of conquering the Guangxi province. The intelligence bureau had already sent a secret report that the Guangxi general, Bai Kuan, had already contacted the southern Ming dynasty and changed sides. Yang Chendong was not surprised at all by this result. Although in terms of strength, Yang Xie was far above the Great Ming dynasty, in terms of influence, the Han territories still belonged to the Great Ming dynasty. Unless Yang Chendong carried out a bloody massacre in the land of Wuxia like he did to other alien races, he still needed to rely on the breath of Wuxia. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Yang Chendong did not want to use the methods he used to deal with the outlanders in the Great Ming dynasty. As such, he would most likely come into contact with negotiations or economic blockades. Speaking of economic blockades, Yang Qindong had already prepared a method. Over the years, in order to maintain the relationship with the Southern Ming dynasty, Yang Xie had sold large amounts of food to the Southern Ming dynasty at a low price. Sometimes, it was even cheaper than what he sold. Many times, Yang Xie would even sell food to the Southern Ming dynasty at a loss in order to let the Southern Ming dynasty develop a habit of trusting him. In the past 10 years, the results were quite good. At the very least, from the Intelligence Bureau's investigation, there were very few people who actually grew food in the Southern Ming dynasty. It was not profitable at all. It was better to buy the food than to grow it yourself. What would you choose? The direct result was that there was a large amount of uncultivated land in the Southern Ming dynasty. Many of the originally fertile lands were covered with weeds that were half the height of a person. Because of this, the Southern Ming dynasty wanted to manage the land and had tried before. However, they found that after investing a lot of manpower and resources, the final results were not very good. When they even lost money, no one had any ideas about the land. There was no profit. In the current Southern Ming dynasty, at least 9.5 out of 10 pieces of land were uncultivated. At this time, if the food supply to the Southern Ming dynasty was suddenly cut off, one could imagine what kind of effect it would have. Of course, the Southern Ming dynasty was also full of talents. They seemed to be afraid that this problem would affect the imperial court, so they built a granary in advance and filled it with food. It was said that it was enough to feed the entire Southern Ming dynasty for 2 years. In other words, once Yang Xie cut off their food supply, they would have 2 years to deal with it. In this way, the problem could be solved. However, since Yang Qindong was prepared to use the food supply issue to threaten the Southern Ming dynasty, how could they not have any methods? Chapter 1600. Was it a granary? Did they store a lot of food? Was it enough to last them for 2 years? Were they not afraid of Yang Xie's threats anymore? That was simple, just burn it. Speaking of which, what Yang Xie did not lack the least was food. Not every place had a climate suitable for large and small factories, and not every place could start light and heavy industries. However, most places could be used for farming. With the current vastness of the Yang family's territory, the number of fields had long reached an astonishing level. With the addition of the steam engine, transportation would become even more convenient. The problem of transporting food had been solved, and the transfer of food from the north to the south would not be as laborious as before. Under these conditions, food would not be a problem to stifle the development of the 5-star army. Moreover, because of Yang Xie's policy of never increasing taxes on land, there were still many farmers. As long as there was enough money, it would be very convenient to reclaim the land. If they were pushed too far, they would burn all the food. This was Yang Qindong's method of dealing with the Southern Ming dynasty. Although it was a bit violent and direct, the results would be very good. Of course, this was the last resort. What he needed to do now was to negotiate. At the very least, he needed to make his stance clear. Just like how he appeared in Yunnan Manor with 500 black knights and dragon guards, wasn't such a risk also for the sake of righteousness and justice? Yang Qindong was also clear about taking back Guangxi. This was what the 3 provinces' king, Zhu Huixing, had promised him. Now that he was sending troops to Guangxi, no one could say anything. Another 5 days had passed, and the situation in Yunnan Manor had stabilized again. Yao Yingjun had a stick in one hand and candy in the other. He had subdued those who opposed him, and even roped in a group of dignitaries and country gentry who supported him. After consulting with Yang Qindong, Yao Yingjun stated that as long as these people cooperated well with the work, they could take away 20% of the wealth when they left their homeland. Seeing that the general trend was changing, more and more of the so-called local tyrants began to support Yao Yingjun and Yang Qindong's reform. Once the matters in Southern Cloud Prefecture were sorted out, all they needed to do was to copy the gourd and draw a ladle, and then extend it to other prefectures. Yunnan Manor no longer had any major problems. Various reinforcements had also entered Yunnan Manor during this period of time. It was time for Yang Chendong to consider the matter of invading Guangxi. Before he could make a move, and before he could think of which main force to bring, news came that the Southern Ming Empire had already sent an envoy that was 10 miles away from the Southern Cloud Prefecture. A messenger came to report that Bugnam of Gojoseon was to personally go out of the city to welcome the envoy. Yang Chendong was a little surprised that the Southern Ming envoy had arrived first. In his opinion, now that he had won a great victory, the other party should be afraid and should be defending to the death. How could there be someone who had the courage to take the initiative to meet him? Yang Chendong ignored the fact that he had to go out of the city to welcome them. To exaggerate, with his current status, even if the Southern Ming Emperor, Zhu Qizhen, came personally, he could say that he didn't want to welcome them. What could others do about it? Ba Daojiang, go take a look. Yang Chendong didn't send out Beta Persei. In his opinion, Ba Daojiang's level was enough to deal with a Southern Ming envoy. Yes. Ba Daojiang, who received the order, immediately cupped his fists and agreed. Then, he ordered 100 black cavalry and left the prince's mansion. Here, with the arrival of various reinforcements, Captain Xiao Vi also rushed to Southern Cloud Prefecture with 1,500 black cavalry and took over the security of the prince's mansion. Outside Southern Cloud Prefecture, Southern Ming Empire's left Assistant Minister of Rights, Zhou Ziong, was sitting in a soft sedan with his head raised. Although it was a soft sedan, the days of hurrying on the road had tormented him. This could be seen from his pale face. He was just a scholar. Usually, there were people to serve him when he wore clothes in the mansion. Now that he had to travel such a long distance, how could he not be tired? But now, all the tiredness had been put to the back of his mind. He was more concerned about whether the person he sent to act as the vanguard had entered Yunnan Manor, whether he had met Yang Chendong, and whether he had spoken of his request. The so-called letting Yang Chendong personally come out to welcome them was actually Zhou Ziong's idea. This time, Zhou Ziong was appointed by the imperial court to deal with the problem of the 3 provinces. But since it was an imperial order, how could he dare to disobey? That was why he wanted to test him. He wanted to see how much respect this Bugnam of Gojoseon had for the Southern Ming Empire. This would determine his attitude. As a member of the civil officials group, Zhou Ziong had his own pride, but he was not stupid. He was very clear about what could be done and what could not be done. The process of waiting had always felt long. Zhou Ziong sat in the sedan and waited for 4 hours. But these were the hottest 4 hours of the day. He had been waiting since noon until now. He felt as if his whole body was about to be oiled. Zhou Ziong, whose throat was about to smoke from the sun, could not help but curse in his heart. He thought that Yang Chendong deliberately did this to express his sincerity. He had already traveled 5 miles. At this moment, he was only 5 miles away from Southern Cloud Prefecture. With such a short distance, he did not believe that the welcoming team had not arrived after such a long time. There was only one possibility. Yang Chendong was deliberately basking in the sun. When he thought of this, Zhou Ziong's face turned ugly. He had a strong feeling that this mission would not be so easy to complete. It might even be impossible to complete. Finally, after Zhou Ziong did not know how many times he cursed in his heart, a group of cavalry finally came from afar. From afar, there were not many people, but the group was unusually orderly. It actually gave off a faint sense of oppression. Zhou Ziong finally could not help but curse. This was indeed unbecoming of a scholar, but if it was anyone else, they would not be able to help but curse when they saw that the welcoming team was moving slower than a snail. Yes, the team from afar was indeed moving very slowly. Ba Daojiang, who was at the front, rode on a horse and deliberately slowed down. He had been by Yang Chendong's side for more than 10 years. Although he did not completely understand the 6th young master, he could sometimes understand the meaning behind his gaze. Since the Southern Ming Empire's envoy was so arrogant, Ba Daojiang would make them uncomfortable. What, do you really think that our 6th young master is someone you can order around? Even if Zhu Qizhen was here, he would not dare to be so arrogant. Since that was the case, Ba Daojiang was naturally going to have some fun. He purposely slowed down his speed so that the emissary and the others could enjoy the scorching sun. This was just a small matter. He still had some big moves that he had yet to use. The team slowly moved forward and finally arrived in front of the envoy's team. At this moment, Zhou Xiang was no longer angry. Now, he just wanted to enter the Southern Cloud Manor and have a good rest. What? Bugnam of Gojoseon did not come? Although he had already expected that Yang Chendong would not be in the welcoming team, as the envoy of the Southern Ming Empire, he still wanted to save face. Therefore, he still pretended to ask this question. Bugnam of Gojoseon is busy with something important. Envoy, are you entering the city? Ba Daojiang did not explain much and replied with a very arrogant attitude. Zhou Ziang was not stupid. Of course, he understood the hidden meaning in this sentence. It was saying that the matter he was here for was insignificant. Thinking that he was the envoy of the Southern Ming Empire and did not need to lower himself to the level of a nameless person, he coldly snorted and pulled the curtain. Let's go. Enter the city. Enter the city. There were close to 1,000 people in the envoy team. They were also exposed to the scorching sun and had been impatient for a long time. Now that they could finally enter the city, their faces were filled with joy. They hurriedly agreed and raised their placards, struck their gongs, and beat their drums. It seemed to be quite a show of force. Hee hee. Ba Daojiang sneered in his heart when he saw that the 1,000 people were still acting like this. Then, he also turned his horse around. However, only those who were very close to him noticed that Ba Daojiang, who had turned his head, had a trace of a malicious smile on his face. Giddy up, giddy up. The black cavalry began to move. They were moving slowly just a moment ago, but this time, they began to speed up. As the war horses galloped, the yellow sand on the official road flew up like a gust of wind and drifted towards the 1,000 people of the envoy team. The yellow sand that came out of nowhere hit the entourage of the envoys, causing them to cough violently and curse loudly. Why are you so slow? Hurry up, follow our team. After waiting for the yellow sand to fall to the ground, the 100 black cavalry suddenly galloped back. After Ba Daojiang greeted them, the war horses continued to gallop, causing the yellow sand to fly up again. Anyone who was not a fool could see that the other party was doing this intentionally. Think about it, how could they be faster than the light cavalry while carrying so many things while walking? As they went back and forth, many of the entourage of the envoy team were covered in sand. Some of them even had sand in their eyes. However, they were still carrying things in their hands and could not put them down. They could only endure it as they walked. Tears flowed down their cheeks uncontrollably. Nay. As if to show off his superb horsemanship, Ba Daojiang rode back again. The war horse raised its front hooves and kicked up a huge amount of sand. Then, it suddenly landed, kicking up a huge amount of dust. Ba Daojiang was not the only one who did this. The 100 black cavalry behind him did the same. In this way, the Southern Ming officials in the envoy team looked as if they had crawled out of yellow mud. A casual shake could cause half a caddy of yellow sand to fall off. They looked as pathetic as they could. Chapter 1601. Hurry up and keep up with our speed. It was the same sentence that the senior had said. Soon after, Ba Daojiang once again spurred his horse forward, stirring up sand and dust. What's going on? Zhou Xiang, who was sitting in the palanquin, did not know what was happening outside. He only felt that the procession was moving and stopping, so he lifted the curtain. It was this action that allowed countless yellow sand to enter the palanquin, causing Zhou Xiang, who was unprepared, to sneeze. Achoo, what is this? What's going on? He continuously fanned himself with his right hand until the black cavalry moved a little further away. Finally, the scene in front of him became clear. Then, Zhou Xiang saw a group of people covered in yellow sand in front of him. Seeing that the originally neat group had become like this, Zhou Xiang instinctively wanted to reprimand them. This group represented the image of the Southern Ming Empire. How could they behave like this? What would others think if they saw this? However, as soon as he opened his mouth, a gust of sand hit his face and was sucked into his mouth. He immediately choked and shut his mouth. At this moment, he only felt that his mouth was full of sand. How could he have the time to reprimand others? Let's go quickly. It was unknown who shouted first in the group, but the others only hesitated for a moment before increasing their speed. Since there was sand and dust everywhere, it was better to walk faster. This way, they would suffer less. First, they walked quickly. In the end, they unknowingly started running. Even so, the sand and dust still hit their bodies. It could be said that they were in an extremely sorry state. At the east gate of Southern Cloud Manor, the commoners who had heard the news had already run over to watch. It seemed to be human nature to watch a show. When Yang Chendong entered the city, they came out to watch. Now that they knew that the group of envoys from the Southern Ming Empire had arrived, they also came out to watch. Speaking of which, although Southern Cloud Manor was the territory of the Southern Ming Empire and had always considered itself a citizen of the Southern Ming Empire, ever since Zhu Huichen was conferred the title of King of 3 provinces, they rarely heard any news about the Southern Ming Empire. Zhu Huichen wasn't a very capable person, but his ambition wasn't small. In order to change the views of the commoners, he forbade his subordinates from talking about the Southern Ming dynasty. Now that he was captured alive, this ban was naturally lifted. When these commoners found out that there was a show to watch, more and more people gathered. Hey, don't you guys think that the Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy delegation is very impressive? A trusting commoner in the crowd asked. Of course. A young man who looked like a scholar said arrogantly. He had studied Confucianism for more than 10 years, and some of his ideas had long been deeply ingrained. Such a person yearned for the imperial examinations of the Great Ming Dynasty and dreamed that one day he would be nominated for the imperial examinations. If that happened, he would really be able to bring glory to his ancestors and become a person above others. The scholar proudly added, "How could you illiterate elders understand the might of the Southern Ming Imperial Court? Do you know the majesty of the emperor in the throne room? You should know that the Great Ming Dynasty values face the most. This time, the Great Ming Dynasty has sent a diplomatic mission. Of course, they will be very awe-inspiring. At that time, you will definitely be surprised. Is that true? Will they be even more impressive than the black cavalry that Bugnam of Gojoseon brought into the city?" A commoner in the crowd clearly didn't believe it and asked. Of course. Their might is not something that you can imagine. Although Bugnam of Gojoseon's guard of honor is not bad, compared to the Southern Ming Imperial Courts, it is still far from enough. The scholar was still full of arrogance, but he wasn't stupid. He didn't dare to say anything that was unfavorable to Yang Chendong. Speaking of which, these scholars who studied Confucianism didn't have a good impression of Yang Chendong. All of this was because if one wanted to become an official in the Yangxia Imperial Court, one needed to have true knowledge. It wasn't enough to just say a few words or write a beautiful essay. That would only work if he had the goods in his stomach. The best way was to apply for the Yangxia Imperial Court and wait for graduation before being allocated. For scholars who had studied Confucianism for more than 10 years, this method was no different from learning it all over again. Who knew how much time would be wasted? So how could they be interested in Yang Chendong? It was only because Yang Chendong was too powerful. He even killed 2 of the 3 great clans of Southern Cloud Prefecture. This battle formation really scared some people. They were unconvinced, but they didn't dare to say it out loud. When the commoners heard the scholar's words, they became even more curious. They wanted to see how impressive the so-called Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy was. After seeing it, they could boast to their friends and relatives. Inside the city gate, the number of commoners increased. After some of the scholars' exaggeration, everyone's curiosity towards the envoys grew. Some people even began to imagine how heroic and domineering the so-called Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy would be. "They're here, they're here." A person with good eyesight in the crowd shouted loudly. This seemed to be an order from the general. With this shout, everyone's attention was drawn to the city gate. Then, under everyone's gaze, the 100 black cavalry took the lead and moved out. Wow! A group of black cavalry, indeed impressive. Bullshit. Just as someone opened his mouth, he was immediately criticized by others. Open your eyes and take a look. That's Bugnam of Gojoseon's black cavalry. They must have gone out of the city to welcome the envoy. After this explanation, the person who shouted previously had an awkward expression. Fortunately, at this moment, another person spoke. Look, the Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy is here. They. That person really couldn't continue talking about how they were. Because the domineering and awe-inspiring Southern Ming Imperial Court didn't appear. Instead, a group of people with dusty faces and disheveled clothes suddenly appeared. It was as if they had lost a battle and had no formation. Following behind the black cavalry was indeed the Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy. Originally, they were still very dignified. But first, they were baptized by dust and sand. Then, they ran for a while. Each of them was covered in sweat. Some people couldn't take it anymore and simply unbuttoned their clothes. Only then did they feel cooler. Because of this, from afar, they didn't look like an envoy at all. On the contrary, they were in an extremely sorry state. To put it bluntly, they weren't much better than the fleeing commoners. This is the awe-inspiring and domineering Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy? In the crowd, there were commoners who couldn't help but ask. That's right, I can't see how impressive they are. They aren't much better than us commoners. That's right. Who was the one who said that the Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy represents the face of the Southern Ming Imperial Court and is very mighty? The commoners were all talking one after another. At this moment, the scholars in the crowd had already lowered their heads with a look of shame. If there was a crack in the ground right now, they would have directly burrowed into it. The commoners were stunned. It was obvious that the appearance of the Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy this time was very unsuccessful. It could even be described as a failure. Zhou Ziang, who was in the sedan, wasn't much better. He had just spat out the dust in his mouth, but there was still sand floating on his face. It could be said that he was in an extremely sorry state. He also knew that now that they had entered the city, according to his previous intention, the procession had to stop. Then, he would get down from the sedan and give a speech. In order to gain everyone's support, he had already obtained the imperial decree, and that was to announce that the scholars from Yunnan and Guizhou could go to Nanjing City at any time to take the exam. Because of Zhu Huihua, they would even receive a certain amount of preferential treatment. Zhou Ziang believed that once these words were spoken, he would quickly obtain the support of these scholars. As a result, Yang Chendong's position in the Southern Cloud Manor would be greatly shaken. At that time, he wouldn't be in the mood to think about solving the problem of Guangxi, and that would be the best time for him to negotiate. But all of this was disrupted by Ba Daojiang's welcoming ceremony. Right now, he absolutely couldn't get down from the sedan. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a disgrace? With no intention of getting down from the sedan, the envoy group quickly followed behind the 100 black cavalry. The other members of the envoy group also lowered their heads as much as they could. Clearly, they also knew that their current image was not good and it was best not to see people. Ba Daojiang rode on his horse and looked at the reactions of the commoners and the envoy group. He nodded in satisfaction. Then, he took the lead and led Zhou Ziang to the relay station in the city. In order to accommodate the 1,000 people of the envoy group, the surrounding courtyards of the relay station were cleared. It was enough to accommodate them. Seeing that many 5-star army soldiers were leaving the clean courtyards, Ba Daojiang cupped his hands and said to Zhou Ziang, "This is the relay station. You must be tired from the long journey, so rest for now." Right, the security in the city isn't too good right now, so it's best if you don't go out. Otherwise, if something happens, no one will be responsible. Ha ha ha. After saying this, without waiting for Zhou Ziang to ask anything, Ba Daojiang spurred his horse and led the black cavalry into the distance. Zhou Xiang opened his mouth, but in the end, he had no choice but to swallow the words he wanted to say back into his stomach. Originally, Zhou Xiang wanted to ask when he would be able to see Bugnam of Gojoseon, but after thinking about it, since he was already here, why would he be afraid of not being able to see Bugnam of Gojoseon? Thus, he decided to take a good rest first. The most important thing was to wash up properly. Speaking of which, his body was currently covered in sand and dust, which was very uncomfortable. After leaving the relay station, Ba Daojiang returned to the Three Provinces King's mansion and reported to Yang Qindong. You did well. Have the other matters been arranged? Yang Qindong had already heard about Ba Daojiang's actions. When he thought of the Southern Ming Kingdom's envoy group's disheveled appearance, he couldn't help but feel a burst of laughter. Young master, everything has been arranged. Some of the veterans disguised as commoners are strolling outside the relay station. As long as these people dare to come out, they will definitely be taught a lesson. Ba Daojiang chuckled. Those veterans were masters who killed without batting an eyelid. If the Southern Ming Kingdom's envoy group really didn't listen, then a few people would really die. Chapter 1602. As for whether the Southern Ming envoys would pursue this matter? What's wrong? I've already told you that the security in the city isn't good and there are many bandits, but you didn't believe me. Who can you blame for this? While Ba Daojiang was still thinking about these matters, Yang Qindong had already opened his mouth. Let's put the matter of the diplomatic mission aside for now. Inform Commander Tianhu that he can bring his troops into Guangxi. If anyone resists, beat them until they submit. The 2nd Regiment will assist them on this matter. Oh right, before you go, don't forget to bring the royal proclamation written by Zhu Huiyun. Yang Qindong had no intention of negotiating with the Southern Ming Imperial Court. At least, not when it came to Guangxi. This time, he had taken the risk to enter Yunnan Prefecture for the rights to govern the 3 provinces. Now that he had won, the 3 provinces should belong to him. Even the Southern Ming Empire couldn't stop him. Besides, why would the King of Shiping attack him? Without the Southern Ming Empire's agreement, would he dare to do so? Since the Southern Ming Empire wanted to play dirty, he didn't mind showing off his skills and letting them know his strength. This was what they meant by, I'll reason with you, and you'll play dirty with me. Since that's the case, when you want to reason with me, I'll show you my fist. Xiqing Prefecture. As one of the borders between Guangxi and Yunnan. On this day, a large number of 5-star army suddenly appeared outside the city. When the soldiers guarding the city saw this scene, their expressions changed greatly and they went to inform the prefect, Wang Bang. Wang Bang was a grand scholar, but his ranking wasn't high. Later, it was because his family donated money and the Southern Ming Empire was in need of people that he was able to get this job. Before this, he was just a small official. This time, it was because of his relationship with Zhou Xiang that he was able to get such a good job as the prefect. As soon as he ascended to the position, Wang Bang's greedy and perverted side was revealed. First, after entering the city, he invited all the nobles and villagers to a meal and obtained many benefits. Following that, all the young ladies in the city had married 3 concubines in a short span of a few days. It could be said that he was radiating a second spring in his life. When the servants came to report the news, he was in his own bedroom teasing 3rd Madam. The shout from outside almost made him impotent. In his anger, he couldn't help but curse, "Who is it? Don't you know that this official is doing something important? Why bother me? Sir, something bad has happened. There are a lot of 5-star army outside the city. It seems like they are going to attack the city." The messenger shouted anxiously. 5, what? The room was silent for a moment, followed by the sound of clothes being put on. Wang Bang quickly put on his official uniform and walked out. He stared at the informant and said, "Say that again." "Sir, there are many cavalrymen from the 5-star army outside the city. It seems that if we don't open the gate, they will attack. What is this Bugnam of Gojoseon trying to do? Is he openly declaring war on the Southern Ming dynasty? Has he ever considered the consequences? Wang Bang yelled in an attempt to intimidate others. However, he felt that there were no outsiders here and shouting like this would not have any effect. Thus, he stopped talking and walked out. Let's go and take a look. This official wants to see who has the guts to do this. Wang Bang was really angry. At this moment, his anger was overflowing. He wanted to have a good talk with the 5-star army. The reason why he had such an attitude was because he was not afraid of the 5-star army. Speaking of which, when Wang Bang was working in the Nanjing government, he had heard a bit about the 5-star army. However, because Zhu Qizhen intentionally downplayed the 5-star army's influence on the Southern Ming dynasty, unless it was a high official, ordinary officials and commoners didn't think that the 5-star army was that powerful. Especially in these years, the 5-star army had been supplying large amounts of food to the Southern Ming dynasty at a very low price. This caused people to interpret it as the 5-star army being afraid of the Southern Ming dynasty, which was why they were doing this. This made many people feel good about themselves. Wang Bang was one of them. He always felt that he was a member of the Southern Ming dynasty and the 5-star army was just Bugnam of Gojoseon's army. No matter how powerful this person was, he still had to look up to the Southern Ming emperor. Since that was the case, what was there to be afraid of? It was with this thought in mind that Wang Bang personally went up the city gate tower to face the 1st Cavalry Army and the 2nd Division of the Langfeng Army. Wang Bang climbed to the top of the city gate tower and looked up. He could see the scene of the 5-star army forming up outside the city. When he saw that the other party was about to force their way into the city without opening the city gate, the big-hearted magistrate Wang directly stretched out his right hand and pointed with his right index finger while shouting, "Are you the 5-star army? Don't you know that Xi City belongs to the Southern Ming dynasty? What do you want to do? Do you want to offend your superiors?" Tianhu and Division Commander Xiao Feng were chatting at the bottom of the city gate. It was just a small Xi City prefecture. They didn't care about it at all. In their opinion, as long as the people guarding the city weren't stupid, the most they should do was open the gate and surrender when they saw them. In the past, when they faced other ferocious foreign races, didn't such things happen often? No matter who you were, when you were faced with tyrannical strength, the only thing you had to do was to lower your head. Only then would you be able to continue living. It was precisely because they were too optimistic that when they saw Wang Bang pointing at them and shouting angrily, Tianhu, Xiao Feng, and the others were stunned. After a while, Tianhu couldn't help but say, "Who the hell is this? Why does he feel so good? Isn't he afraid that we won't say anything? How dare he provoke us?" In Tianhu's eyes, anyone who dared to criticize the 1st Cavalry Army in front of him was a serious provocation. There was nothing to say to such a person. There was only one word to say: beat him. Beat him until he submitted. That's right, what a big idiot. Xiao Feng, who was at the side, also agreed. He hadn't met such a weirdo in a long time. Then it's settled. I just hope that he won't be too arrogant. Tianhu chuckled and waved his hand. His guard captain, Hu Helu, responded and rode down the city gate. Although they had already decided to teach Wang Bang a lesson, they still had to go through the necessary process. When Hu and Lu Wei arrived at the city gate, they picked up a scroll that looked like an imperial edict. Opening it up and reading it out loud, "The kings of the 3 provinces have given their orders. Today, the 5-star army will be taking over Guangxi. All the officials in Guangxi are to cooperate fully if they see this king." As Hu Helu read, he looked up at the city gate as if he was looking at an idiot. He wanted to see what kind of reaction this Southern Ming official would have after hearing this. When he raised his head, he couldn't help but be shocked. Almost instinctively, he hurriedly moved to the right. Just as he finished his movement, an arrow flew past where he was standing and stabbed into the ground. Hu Helu was less than 20 steps away from the city gate tower. At this distance, as long as one had the strength, they would be able to shoot an arrow and threaten others. Fortunately, Wang Bang wasn't familiar with bows and arrows. Otherwise, if it was another archer, it wouldn't have been so easy to dodge. What bullshit king of 3 provinces? This is Southern Ming's Guangxi, not someone's Guangxi. You all should quickly retreat. Otherwise, if we meet with weapons and lose your life, you can't blame anyone. Wang Bang shot an arrow. Although it didn't hit his opponent, it still gave Hu Helu a fright. The southern Ming soldiers on the city gate tower laughed heartily. When Wang Bang heard the laughter, he became very spirited. When he spoke, his righteous words were filled with righteousness. Damn, they actually made the first move. Huh, now there's nothing to say. Tian, who also saw Wang Bang's appearance when he shot the arrow. After seeing that Hu Helu was fine, he let out a sigh of relief and then laughed loudly. Originally, he thought that if he made the first move, wouldn't it be bad if word got out? Now that the other party made the first move, there was nothing wrong with what he did. There's nothing to say. How about this, Commander Tian, you call them back first. The cannons don't have eyes. Don't accidentally hurt our own people. At this moment, Xiao Feng's eyes were also wide open. When he looked carefully, there was only excitement. Originally, he thought that if the defending general was tactful, they wouldn't be of any use. However, he didn't expect to meet such a strong person in the first city. How could he be polite? He would just blast them. Commander Hu, come back. Commander Lin, mount the field cannons and aim at them. Blast them. After the two orders were given, Hu Helu turned his horse around and returned. The 5-star army also had cannons pushed forward from the rear. On the city gate tower of C City, when he saw Hu Helu retreating without saying anything, Wang Bang looked up to the sky and laughed. He said to the soldiers beside him, "Did you see that? They're scared. Some people are like this. If you don't show them some power, they won't know how many eyes you have." Yes, the prefectural magistrate is right. The prefectural magistrate is mighty. Ha ha ha. When he heard this, Wang Bang's face lit up with excitement. At this moment, it was as if he was possessed by the god of war. He even thought that if his actions were to spread to the southern Ming dynasty, he would definitely be rewarded. He laughed to himself and thought about his beautiful future. Suddenly, someone beside him said, "My lord, look. What are they doing?" Following the direction of the finger, 10 field cannons were pushed out and pushed to the front line. The west gate of C City was also within the range of the cannons. There was a saying that the truth of the great Ming dynasty was born from everyone's bickering and bragging in the imperial court. The truth of the world was always within the range of the cannons. Chapter 1603. This time, the Lengfeng army was going to teach these arrogant southern Ming officials a lesson. They were going to tell them that their arrogance had long been trampled under their feet. To deal with them, they only needed to fire the cannons and everything would be over. Fire. When the 10 field cannons were ready, Artillery Battalion Commander Lin Luan gave a shout and the 10 cannons roared in unison. Beams of light flashed and drew a beautiful arc in the air before landing on the city wall of C City opposite. At this moment, Wang Bang was still standing there with his hands on his waist and an arrogant look on his face. His sense of superiority made him not believe that the 5-star army would dare to fire at him. He was an official of the southern Ming dynasty and was considered a direct descendant of the emperor. He was not someone that Bugnam of Gojoseon, who was forced to be conferred the title, could compare to. Not to mention, the one who came this time was not Bugnam of Gojoseon, but a general that he had never heard of before. "Do you have a lot of cavalry?" "So what? Were the grassland cavalry strong or not? Weren't they still defeated by the great Ming dynasty?" Now that he had a strong city in his hands, he did not believe that these boorish soldiers would dare to do anything to him. The more he did not believe, the more arrogant he became. Wang Bang had already thought about it. He wanted to use this opportunity to prove himself. He wanted to tell the world that not only was he greedy, he was also a very courageous person. As long as the imperial court was willing to put him in an important position, the 5-star army would definitely be defeated in front of him. He would become the nemesis of the 5-star army. The more he thought about it, the more he thought about it. He even thought about how the southern Ming emperor would reward him after this battle. Would he be transferred back to Nanjing? After all, there were too many rich people there. That was the place where he should display his talents. It was not like Sea City where there were too few rich people. He had not even used his full strength yet, but he had already plundered 50 to 60% of the rich people. It was not a challenge at all. He still had a smile on his face as he thought about the beautiful future. At this moment, the cannonball whistled through the air. In Wang Bang's eyes, he could even clearly see a beam of light flying straight towards him. With a smile on his face, the cannons bombarded the city gate tower. This became the last pose and expression Wang Bang maintained before he died. This was because one of the cannonballs had unfortunately landed about 4 steps in front of him, and the powerful force had directly sent him flying. In mid-air, Wang Bang's body began to disintegrate, so much so that not even a complete corpse could be found. The bombardment began. Just the first round of cannon fire had sent Wang Bang flying. At the same time, the South Ming army's pride and arrogance had been destroyed. A few minutes ago, no one thought that the 5-star army would really open fire. Even if the field cannons were pushed out, they still thought that the other party was just trying to scare them. Moreover, even if the cannons were to be fired, they had the advantage of the city walls, and their safety would be guaranteed for a short period of time. They were the army of the Southern Ming dynasty. Although they used to follow the king of 3 provinces, Zhu Huichen, there were still many soldiers who had seen the world. They had seen the so-called red barbarian cannons that were loaded with live ammunition before. Other than looking quite scary, their power was only so-so. It was impossible for them to destroy the city walls with a single wave of attacks. As long as they were given time, they would be able to defend the city and send reinforcements. With the support of the Southern Ming dynasty, as long as reinforcements continuously arrived, the 5-star army would definitely be defeated. It was because they had underestimated the 5-star army's cannons that they did not know that the power of the cannons was not something that real cannons could compare to. This caused them to walk further and further down the wrong path. When the cannonballs landed on the city gate tower, their power began to explode. Not only did they create a deep hole in the city wall, but the people within a dozen steps were either killed or injured. Only then did the Southern Ming army feel fear. However, it was too late now. The 10 cannonballs were only the first wave of probing attacks. After adjusting the coordinates, more and more cannonballs were fired at the city gate tower. Immediately, there were cries of ghosts and howls of wolves. Blood and limbs flew everywhere, flying past the heads of the terrified Southern Ming soldiers. Their courage had been broken, Wang Bang had died, and their backbone was gone. Right now, the city gate tower of Sea City was in chaos. Under the bombardment of cannonballs, there seemed to be no place that was safe. Everyone was fleeing in all directions. Often, when one went east, others would go west. However, in the end, they were all in the relatively limited area below the city gate tower. In the chaos, the generals could not find the soldiers, and the soldiers could not find the generals. Even if they wanted to resist, it would be futile. It was during this chaos that the 2 cannons lowered their muzzles and began to fire at the west gate of Sea City. At this moment, Tian, who had told Division Commander Xiao Feng to organize the world's first cavalry army and prepare to charge. Not only that, behind the world's first cavalry army, Meng's 2nd Division and Meng's 3rd Division were also prepared to enter and clean up the battlefield. This time, in order to intimidate the Southern Ming, Yang Chendong had sent out 3 armies and 1 division. It could be said that he had made ample preparations. With such a powerful military advantage, even if the Southern Ming really wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality, he would not be afraid of them sending an army. Under the ferocious bombardment of the field cannons, the city gate was blasted open in just a few hits. Then, the cavalry of the world's number 1 cavalry army charged forward and rushed into the city through the blasted open city gate. They did not expect the 5-star army to attack so decisively and enter the city so quickly. The Southern Ming soldiers inside the city were not prepared at all. Only a few soldiers guarding the city gate resisted. However, in front of the world's first cavalry army, their actions were like small boats in front of a tsunami. After the first wave passed, they did not have the ability to make any waves. Sea City was broken. From the beginning of the attack to entering the city, not even an hour had passed. The so-called strong city was broken just like that. After the news spread out, the faces of everyone who heard it greatly changed, especially the officials and generals of Guangxi. Their faces were unsightly. They were thinking, if the main force of the 5-star army came, what should they do? The conquest of Guangxi was still ongoing. It was not something that could be solved in a few days. After handing the matter to Tianhu and Xiaofeng, Yang Chendong did not take care of it anymore. Instead, he began to deal with the matters of Yunnan and Guizhou. Previously, he had given the authority of the two places to Yao Yingjun, and the other party had gladly accepted it. Moreover, he quickly arranged for people to bring Zhu Yan, who was also the Eternal Victory Princess. After being completely integrated into Yangxia, this title naturally became history and would not appear again, to the Southern Cloud Manor. He was using another method to show his loyalty to Yang Hodong. See, I even brought my family over. There is nothing to worry about. The 6th young master can also completely trust me. Regarding Yao Yingjuan's actions, Yang Chendong was naturally satisfied. It was because of this that he decided to stay for a while and properly train the other party to see if this person was suitable. After all, Yao Yingjun had always been doing intelligence work. Although he later led troops, he did not make too much of a name. Just like this, Yang Chendong stayed and helped Yao Yingjun come up with plans. Yang Chendong adopted a 3-step policy. First, he sent out the new army and the Russian division, a total of nearly 100,000 people, to attack the remnants of Yunnan and Guizhou. This included some mountain bandits who were usually kings of the mountains. If a place wanted to develop, the problem of public security must be solved first. If one's personal safety was not guaranteed, how could one attract others? Regarding this matter, Yang Chendong also gave instructions to Commander Su He and Division Commander A Huli before they left. This time, the opponents were mostly Han people, so they should not be killed unless the leaders were severely punished for their crimes. The others could be spared and promised to be given good land. When they returned to their ancestral homes, they could wait for their land to be distributed. As long as the people had an environment to rely on, not many people would really rebel. After all, those who rebelled could be beheaded at any time. The purpose of the rebellion was to survive. Even if they could live a good life as an ordinary citizen outside, why would they take such risks and risk their lives? Remember, you can't be careless. Especially pay attention to Mukong. As a native of Yunnan and the eldest son of the king of Shiping, his whereabouts are unknown. No one knows what he will do. This time, no matter who it is, capturing Mutsong will be a great achievement. After Yang Chendong gave a few more instructions, he sent the 2 generals out of the manor and let them do as they pleased. The second step of the 3 steps was to seize the time to distribute the land. Borrowing the leftover prestige of Yunnan's 3 great families being dealt with, the new Yang faction officials who were transferred over from Crimson City all began to get busy. After coming to the 3 provinces' king manors to receive their appointment letters, they rushed to various towns and county capitals. In order to stabilize the local people, the first thing to do was to provide them with a better living environment. Only then would they crowd around you. Some of your decisions and policies would be faster and more powerful. In order to prevent collusion between officials and merchants, a large number of Yangxia's reporters were also arranged. Using the words Yang Chendong said to the dispatched officials, their actions would be watched. If anyone was found to be in trouble or tarnishing the image of Yangxia in the eyes of the people, they would be dealt with severely. Not only him, but those who recommended him as an official and other descendants of the 5 blessings would also be affected. Chapter 1604. In other words, if you were a piece of rat poop, you would spoil the entire pot of soup. A person could be hot-headed and not care about their own fate for their own selfish desires. However, it was impossible for a person to not care about the feelings of their loved ones. To be an official in Yangxia, the most basic requirement was that one's family background must be clean and they must have enough relatives. For example, if an orphan suddenly appeared out of nowhere, it would not be a problem for you to join the army. However, if you wanted to be an official, it would be impossible. This was a hard and fast rule that Yang Chendong had requested. Being an official for 1,000 miles was only for money. This was a rule that had been passed down for thousands of years by the ancestors. There must be a reason for it. Yang Chendong did not want to test people, and he did not have the time to do so. Because of this, it was better to take advantage of these people's weaknesses. As long as all the officials had scruples before doing anything, they would not dare to take risks easily. This would greatly reduce the crime rate of the officials. Because of the implementation of this set of policies, the integrity of the officials in the Yang faction had never been a problem. Perhaps there were some mediocre officials who did not do anything, but there was no one who was greedy. This was the result of Yang Chendong making use of family and friendship to make an issue out of it. Speaking of which, the officials who were appointed were all very careful. Not to mention that if they really extended their greedy hands, it would bring bad effects to their loved ones. They might even destroy many people because of their own selfish thoughts. Just speaking of which, as Yang Xia continued to grow stronger, their future would also be incomparably bright. At this time, who would be stupid enough to take the initiative to destroy their own future? As for not being discovered when they did something bad? Haha. With the existence of Yang Xia reporters, if they did something bad, it would immediately be exposed. This was fully proven in other Yang Xia provinces. Who knew how many officials who were sent out had fallen into the hands of these reporters? With the example of those seniors, they did not dare to take the slightest bit of risk. As for bribing those Yang Xia reporters, forget about it. Those people were not in the same department as them. They were directly in charge of Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Chendong. As long as they performed well, they could even become officials in the future. With such a bright future, who would bow their heads for some money? In addition, the Yang Xia reporters had a rotation system and a patrolling system. Most of the time, the local officials could not figure out the true identity of the Yang Xia reporters in their territory. So how could they bribe them? When you finally managed to bribe one, but that person was transferred away and replaced with a new person, plus the existence of the patrolling reporters, this possibility became infinitely small, and no one dared to try again. The officials did not dare to be greedy. Instead, they wholeheartedly wanted to be good officials. They wanted to achieve political achievements and make decisions for the people. The ones who benefited were naturally the ordinary people, but it also made the rich and powerful suffer. When they raised a large amount of money and fought to befriend the new Yang Xia officials, they found that the other party was unexpectedly stubborn. This time, they did not know what to do. Since they could not send money, they had to follow the rules. If they did not give up their rights and interests, they would be punished. As a result, the rich and powerful could only bow their heads and admit defeat, or raise their swords and rebel. But to rely on those rich and powerful people to rebel? Forget it, they were the group of people who were most afraid of death. Perhaps they would dare to bully a good citizen, but to go against the government was still extremely powerful. Especially against the 5-star army that killed without blinking an eye, they did not have the guts to do so. Once the public security was stabilized, the interests of the people were protected, and there was a way out for their livelihood, the third step was to move. That was mass migration. The first to move were those rich and powerful people. As long as these people left their ancestral homes and nests, their influence would be reduced to the lowest, and they would not be a threat to the government. At the very least, the ordinary people could choose to move out, and they would be the representatives of the Han people in various places. As a result, not only would the Chinese language and culture be spread better, it would also be very beneficial to the people who were willing to move out. For example, if they chose to move out, they would receive more land, more than double the amount of land they would get if they stayed. Just by leaving their homeland, they could receive so many benefits, and it was inevitable that some people would be tempted. When a large number of people were moved out, and scattered to the other Yang Xia provinces, the nobility of the Han people would gradually be reflected. Think about it, if a place was filled with Han people, how could it show the rise of their status in the world? Only when there were different kinds of ethnic groups would the Han people be able to stand high above the masses. That would be the only way to prove everything. Moving out a portion of the people would also reduce the pressure on Yunnan and Guizhou. With a smaller population, the amount of land they would receive would be more. When the people had money and food, they would have more children, and the new Han people would spread to the other Yangtze provinces. This was like a virtuous cycle, and in the end, the Han people would spread all over the world, and become the rulers of any place. Even if there was a day when the descendants of Yang Xie did not live up to expectations, the country would still fall into the hands of the Han people. This was enough to make Yang Qindong feel gratified and satisfied. After the three-step policy was formulated, Yao Yingjun led a group of officials and began to get busy. Yang Qindong also did his best to help from the side. For example, with him here, the Yangtze provinces opened their doors to welcome the Han people, and prepared houses, fields, and necessities in advance. If Yao Yingjun were to do these things, who knew how much time it would take to coordinate? Yang Qindong was very busy, and in contrast, Zhou Xiang was very idle. Ever since he came to Yunnan Manor, he first ate a face full of dust before entering the city. When he entered the city and entered the relay station, he cleaned up and wanted to see Bugnam of Guizhou and Yang Qindong. He had been waiting for an answer. Zhou Xiang was someone that Yang Qindong wanted to meet, but not now. He wanted to wait until the situation in Guangxi was under control. However, Zhou Xiang did not know that. He was trapped in the relay station every day, and did not know anything about the outside world. Right now, he was thinking about how to meet Yang Qindong. In his view, the longer some things were delayed, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. At the very least, if the problem was not solved for a long time, how would the court look at him? How would Emperor Yingzong look at him? Would they say that he was too incompetent? At this moment, he was in the tiger's den, but Zhou Xiang was still thinking about the emperor's opinion of him. He was thinking about his own official career. It had to be said that he was really obsessed with being an official. In fact, Zhou Xiang was just a representative of the Southern Ming dynasty's civil officials. The Southern Ming dynasty's civil officials had the same name, but they cared more about benefits. The higher one's position was, the more famous one would be, and the more benefits one could obtain. This made countless people think of ways to climb up the ranks. Sometimes, in order to attract the attention of others or the emperor, they would even do things that would leave others dumbfounded. They did not hesitate to impeach each other. In short, the court was often a mess. If they wanted to do something good, they would have to face all kinds of resistance and trouble. There was a saying in the future, being an official is good, being an official is good, wearing leather shoes and a watch. However, compared to the officials of the Great Ming Dynasty, the difference was still too far. For example, as long as a scholar passed the county examination, it was proof that they had entered a privileged society. They did not have to pay taxes, and they also had the right to not kneel when they saw an official. If they were more powerful and passed the county examination, then they would have the power to own a large amount of land and servants. All kinds of privileges would constantly come to them. Moreover, they did not have to pay taxes to the country. Over time, when the number of people in this group increased, they would own nearly half of the world's wealth with a few people. At that time, it would be easier said than done for the country to become rich and powerful. If they wanted to reform, then they would have to face the attacks of these people. It would be impossible not to fail. Zhou Xiang was one of them. He was one of the people who obtained benefits. However, his heart was bigger than those people. His goal was to continue to climb up. In order to achieve this goal, he had to first meet Yang Qindong. In order to achieve this goal, he first gave money to the Yangtze staff at the relay station. Unfortunately, there were clear rules. These staff did not dare to accept money. Did they not want to live? Bribery was not an option. Zhou Xiang sent people out of the relay station to take the initiative to look for clues about Bugnam of Guizhou. He wanted to see the real person through his own efforts. However, he had forgotten Ba Daojiang's warning. When the people of the diplomatic mission walked out of the relay station, they were quickly beaten up by the hooligans, who looked at them. They walked back with bruises all over their faces. Because of this matter, Zhou Xiang vented his anger on the staff of the relay station. However, the result was that the current Yunnan manor was not peaceful. He had already told them not to go out casually, but they did not listen. Who could they blame? If not even one person could leave, how could they talk about meeting Yang Chendong? Zhou Xiang sighed. He had no choice but to wait bitterly. Zhou Xiang had no choice. He did not know what had happened in Guangxi. However, in Nanjing Manor, the capital of the Southern Ming dynasty, the news had already spread. Because of this, the ministers were stirred up into a pot of porridge. The 5-star army and the 3 provinces army had started a war. When they heard this news, the Southern Ming dynasty still had the mood of watching a good show. In many people's hearts, this was simply a fight between 2 tigers. They only needed to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. If the time was right, they would make a move to seize the benefits that belonged to them. The development of the matter was as they had expected. The 3 provinces army was indeed in chaos. What made them feel even more incredulous was that Bugnam of Guozhou and Yang Chendong actually believed the words of the 3 provinces King Zhu Huifu and only brought 500 people into Yunnan Manor. Chapter 1605. When they received this news, all of the officials in the Southern Ming dynasty sucked in a breath of cold air. While they sighed at Yang Chendong's courage, they also cursed at his stupidity. If it was just a meeting, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers would have chosen to lower their heads. Then, the world would have been at peace, and there would not have been so many wars. After accepting and digesting this news, some officials suggested that they use this opportunity to take down Guangxi. This was because no matter who won or lost, Guangxi would be marginalized due to its geography. This was the best opportunity for the Southern Ming dynasty to make a move. Naturally, Zhu Qizhen also agreed to this. As such, he sent out Zhou Xiang. Sure enough, things went very smoothly. After convincing Bai Kuan, Guangxi once again belonged to the Southern Ming dynasty. Following this, it was time to snatch the fruits. A large number of officials with backgrounds and backing were sent to Guangxi, and the Southern Ming dynasty began to control this region. At the same time, in order to kill Yang Chendong, they also sent a letter to Wang Mubin of Shiping, telling him to find an opportunity to make a move. In short, they wanted to kill Yang Chendong. According to the predictions of the Southern Ming dynasty's officials, Bugnam of Guozhou was too gullible. This time, he would definitely suffer a big setback and might even be killed. If this was the case, then the Yang Xie dynasty would definitely fall into chaos, and the Southern Ming dynasty would take this opportunity to snatch more benefits. There were even some officials who directly cried in the imperial court, praising their ancestors for their blessings. Once Bugnam of Guozhou died, the Yang Xie dynasty would fall into chaos, and the Great Ming dynasty would rise. Once they expanded their strength, they would be able to take down Baiming one day and unify the world. There were even officials who suggested that they should immediately contact the generals of the Yang Xie dynasty outside. The Southern Ming dynasty could recognize their identities and recognize them as the rulers of their regions. The only condition was to help them take down Baiming. This way, the Great Ming dynasty would be able to develop as they wished, and the Southern Ming dynasty would not interfere. Zhu Qizhen was clearly interested in the latter suggestion. He asked the ministers to analyze the possibility of success and list out the names of these people for future research. Just as the Southern Ming dynasty was busy, new news came. Bugnam of Guozhou had won a great victory. Not only did he capture the king of 3 provinces, Zhu Huituan, alive, he even captured the king of Shiping, Mu Bin, who wanted to fish in troubled waters. This was like a bolt from the blue that struck the Southern Ming dynasty's imperial court, making everyone unable to believe that all this was true. Didn't the news say that Bugnam of Guozhou only brought 500 people into Southern Cloud Prefecture? In the Southern Cloud Manor, Zhu Huihua had an army of tens of thousands. How could he lose against 500 people in his own territory? Unable to digest this result, Zhu Qizhen questioned loudly in the imperial court, could it be that Yang Chendong is immortal? You still can't kill him? In the face of the emperor's anger and questioning, the officials all bowed their heads. No one could answer, no one could explain, because this was something they couldn't figure out in their hearts. Fortunately, someone in the imperial court immediately opened his mouth and raised another question. Once Bugnam of Gojoseon dealt with Zhu Huihua and Mu Bin, wouldn't that be equivalent to settling Yunnan and Guizhou? Wouldn't that mean that he was going to fight for Guangxi next? After all, Yang Chendong was willing to take the risk to enter Southern Cloud Prefecture because of the peace of the three provinces. At that time, the Beiming imperial court knew about this matter, but it didn't happen. This could also be regarded as tacit consent. Now that the other party had the upper hand, he naturally had the right to take everything that he should have. After the new question was thrown out, Zhu Qizhen, who was sitting on the golden dragon throne, had a big change in his expression. If this was the case, then the situation was too unfavorable for him. The Great Ming Empire was already divided into the north and south, and its strength was no longer the same as before. If they really lost the three provinces, how would the Southern Ming Empire survive? More importantly, there would be no barrier between them and the five-star army in the future. If one day, the other party had evil intentions, wouldn't they be able to attack whenever they wanted? Thinking of this, Zhu Qizhen suddenly stood up from the golden dragon throne and shouted, "No, we definitely can't let the five-star army occupy the three provinces and threaten the foundation of our Southern Ming Empire." The emperor's big change scared the officials at first, but then they thought that if such a situation really happened, they wouldn't have good days as officials. At that moment, they reacted one by one and hurriedly agreed. Their attitudes were quickly unified. After their thoughts were unified, they began to discuss the next step. This led to the matter of Zhou Xiang going to Southern Cloud Prefecture. After all, he was at the front lines and was very familiar with the situation there. This was already a court meeting a month ago. This time, all the officials gathered in the throne room to talk about the matter at hand. That was, there had already been an urgent report sent from 800 li away. The five-star army had indeed sent out troops, and they had come from Yunnan to Guangxi in a rather unyielding manner. They had used force to blast open the gates of Sea City, and even the newly appointed magistrate, Wang Bang, had died in battle. When the news came, it was like a large dark cloud hanging over the heads of all the officials, causing their expressions to become quite unsightly. After receiving the news last night, Zhu Qizhen practically didn't sleep for the entire night. At this moment, his spirit seemed to be somewhat dispirited. Sitting on the golden dragon throne, his eyes were somewhat red as he asked below. Sea City has been lost. This matter should already be known by all my beloved officials. Next, let's talk about the countermeasures. After saying this, Zhu Qizhen leaned his body against the golden dragon throne, looking very haggard. As an emperor, Zhu Qizhen's luck wasn't too good. When he first became the emperor, the Great Ming dynasty had just experienced the golden age of Ren Xuanji's rule. Whether it was in terms of military or economic strength, the Great Ming dynasty was strong. At that time, as the emperor, when he spoke, hundreds of officials would agree. How awe-inspiring was that? But all of this was blown away by the wind with the changes in the Tumu fortress. A great defeat in military history dealt a heavy blow to the Great Ming dynasty's foundation. This young emperor had no choice but to move from the northern capital to the southern capital and establish himself as the emperor of the Southern Ming dynasty. Even so, Zhu Qizhen still didn't admit defeat. He still wanted to work hard and one day fight back, unify the Great Ming dynasty, and return to glory. At that time, he was very grateful to Yang Chendong. If not for this person, he would have become Yeshen's captive in the Tumu fortress. He might even have lost his life. So at that time, he really treated this descendant of the Yang clan as an important official. But who would have thought that Yang Chendong was more than just an ordinary person? After leaving him, he first returned to Beiming and helped Dai Zong, Zhu Qiu, fight a beautiful battle to defend the capital and expel Yeshen. After that, he came down south at Zhu Qizhen's request. After that, he established his own faction. Now, it had developed into a faction that wasn't inferior to the Southern Ming dynasty. In Zhu Qizhen's eyes, Yang Qindong's Yang Xia was only a faction that wasn't inferior to the Southern Ming dynasty. It wasn't that he didn't want to look at all of this, but that the officials below him didn't tell him the truth. Or perhaps, those officials didn't know what the Far East was? What was the Ross Duchy? In their eyes, a Mongol tribe like Yeshen was already an incredible existence. As the saying goes, the ignorant are fearless. If one didn't understand deeply enough, they wouldn't be able to understand the strength of their opponent. But now, after the Five-Star Army took down Yunnan and Guizhou, they sent troops to Guangxi. They even dared to openly oppose the Southern Ming dynasty. Only then did Zhu Qizhen feel the pressure. He clearly understood that the appetite of this Bugnam of Gojoseon that he personally conferred was huge. The ass decides the head. Since he was the emperor of the Southern Ming dynasty, he definitely wouldn't allow anyone to threaten him. This time, he gathered all of the officials so that they could come up with a plan for him. Most of the officials had already received the news last night. Even if they received the news a little slower, they still knew the whole story before the morning court. Other than cursing Yang Qindong's audacity in their hearts, they were also thinking of a way to solve the problem. However, the actions of the Five-Star Army were truly unexpected. How could it be solved so easily? Now that the emperor asked this question, the officials couldn't think of a good way to deal with it. They could only shut their mouths. After all, this wasn't the time to fight for credit. If they said something wrong, they would incur the emperor's wrath. When the emperor asked for a plan, all of the officials became mute. Zhu Qizhen was naturally displeased. He slowly straightened his body and his face was even uglier than before. What's wrong? You all usually consider yourselves as virtuous officials, comparing yourselves to Guanzhong and Yue. Now that I need you all, why aren't you speaking? Facing the emperor's question, the officials lowered their heads even more. They all tucked their tails between their legs and acted as if they were invisible. When Zhu Qizhen saw the reactions of the officials, he was very disappointed. If possible, he really wanted to replace all of these ministers. However, if he really did that, he was afraid that the political power of the Southern Ming dynasty would really be unstable. After all, the great Ming dynasty emphasized that the emperor and the scholar officials ruled the country together. Zhu Qizhen took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart. He decided to call them out. Since no one took the initiative to answer, he could only ask them one by one and force them to think of a solution. Since it was the emperor who asked, he naturally wouldn't choose those insignificant officials. Zhu Qizhen's gaze looked at the people standing at the front of the hall. The first person he called out was the Minister of War, Kuang Yi. After all, this involved war and the Ministry of War had a lot of say. Beloved official Kuang, what do you think of this matter? How should we solve it? Kuang Yi wasn't young and could boast of being one of the old officials. For the sake of the stability of the Southern Ming dynasty, he had racked his brains and exhausted his body and mind. He had visited almost all of the Southern Ming dynasty's military stations at least once. He had even visited some places several times. He was definitely worthy of this title. Chapter 1606. It was precisely because he understood the military strength of the Southern Ming Empire very well that he stood up against King Shiping when the three provincial kings invited King Wu Nan to join Yunnan Manor. He even asked the emperor to issue an imperial edict stating that the three provinces had been the land of the Southern Ming Empire since ancient times and no one had the right to make decisions about it. Unfortunately, no one listened to his suggestion at that time. Because of this, there were many people who secretly laughed at his courage. As the Minister of War of the Southern Ming, he should be very courageous. How could he achieve great things if he was so careful? Not only the ordinary officials, even Zhu Qizhen didn't agree with this decision. In his opinion, this was a chance to kill Yang Qindong. If he issued an edict, what would he do if Yang Qindong didn't go to Yunnan Manor? Wouldn't he be helping his opponent? However, he never thought that Zhu Huiyun was so incompetent and Mu Bin was such a waste. They actually allowed Yang Qindong to succeed. As a result, the relationship between the Southern Ming and the Five-Star Army was so tense that they had to use weapons. If he knew this would happen, it would be great if Zhu Qizhen listened to Kuang Ye's words. At least that way, Yang Chendong would lose an excuse to go to war with the Southern Ming. This way, the righteousness would be on his side. If Yang Chendong still dared to send troops, he could use the excuse of punishing the thief to announce to the world and lead everyone to attack Bugnam of Gojoseon. But now, the righteousness was in the other party's hands. Now that the other party sent troops, it became a righteous move. This made Zhu Qizhen very difficult. Only then did he want to ask Kuang Yi, the Minister of War, if he had a better idea. When his name was called, Kuang Yi, who originally didn't want to speak, could only hold his board and walk out of the line. He lowered his head and said, "Emperor, in this official's opinion, the Five-Star Army now holds the righteousness. If we fight with them over Guangxi, it is unreasonable." Unreasonable? The entire Southern Ming is my world. Doesn't Guangxi belong to the Southern Ming? How is it unreasonable? Although he knew that Kuang Yi was speaking the truth, his words still caused Zhu Qizhen to be quite dissatisfied. Exactly. All lands under the heavens belong to the emperor, all lands by the emperor's shores belong to the emperor. His Majesty is only taking back Guangxi's administrative authority. How could it be unreasonable? Your Excellency, is your buttocks crooked? The Minister of Works, Wei Luo, took the initiative to stand up and criticize Kuang Yi. In the past, the Southern Ming dynasty's Minister of Works was Jiang Yuan. However, this person had once harmed Yang Chendong's 7th Madam, Su Man-er's family. After the order was given, the members of the Security Bureau hidden in the Southern Ming dynasty gathered evidence of corruption and made their move. They announced it to the world and caused Zhu Qizhen to be shaken. In the end, they were killed and their family members were exiled. After avenging the 7th Madam, Wei Luo took over the position. Ever since he took over the position, he had been living a life of suffocation. There was no other reason other than his lack of experience. In addition, the Ministry of Works had not built much over the years and had spent a lot of money, but most of the firearms produced were not up to standard. Because of this matter, the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, had complained to him many times. Now that he finally had a chance to use this opportunity, how could he give up on it? After hearing Wei Luo's words, Kuang Yi did not say anything. Instead, he shook his head and bowed to Zhu Qizhen before returning to his original position. He would not lower himself to the same level as Wei Luo. Wei Luo had relied on flattery and gifts to obtain the position of Minister of Works. In reality, he did not have any ability at all. It was precisely because there were too many people like him who did not care about politics that the Southern Ming dynasty had not improved much over the years. Kuang Yi did not say anything, but his attitude was clearly expressed. Zhu Qizhen thought to himself, are we really going to give up on Guangxi? With this thought, he could not help but shake his head. Then, his gaze fell on the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua. As the Minister of Revenue, he was in charge of money. Wherever the Southern Ming dynasty needed money, he would not be able to do so. Zhu Qizhen naturally would not ask about small matters. Now that he had asked, it proved that the money used was not small. It had to be said that over the years, the Southern Ming dynasty's Ministry of Revenue still had some savings. Not to mention other things, just the amount of money obtained from selling those people to Yangshi was enough to fill up the national treasury for a time. It was because of this that the Southern Ming dynasty's army continued to expand over the years, reaching an astonishing number of 2.5 million soldiers. After being called by the emperor, Wang Zhua stood up with a board in his hand. Reporting to the emperor, the Ministry of Revenue has some savings. In an emergency, we can mobilize 15 million taels. Good, transfer the money, transfer the troops, and transfer the provisions. Finally hearing this good news, Zhu Qizhen immediately became spirited. His voice also became louder. This meant that war was about to begin. When the other officials heard this, their faces all changed. Everyone knew that once the war machine was activated, the money would be spent like water. As long as the operation was good, there was a great chance of getting money. Some people couldn't help but blush when they thought of the benefits they could earn. However, there were some people who thought even further. Were they about to start a war with the 5-star army? If they really fought, what were their chances of winning? If they won, then everything would be fine. However, what if they lost? It wouldn't be wrong to say that this was a kingdom war. If that was the case, then there was no way out if they lost. Many people unconsciously thought of the Battle of Tuma Castle. At that time, the Great Ming Dynasty was almost destroyed because of a war. At that time, Zhu Qizhen was leading the army. An army of over 200,000 soldiers could not even defeat 60,000 soldiers. Only a few years had passed. Now that they had to fight with the 5-star army, what were their chances of winning? Zhu Qizhen, who was sitting on the dragon throne, saw the changes in the officials' faces. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. How could he ever walk out from the shadow of that battle? If it was possible, why would he be willing to fight? It was just that the situation was like this. He couldn't just watch the 5-star army occupy 3 provinces and continue to advance to devour the southern Ming dynasty. If that was the case, then it would be better to fight. Naturally, when Zhu Qizhen asked about the money, it didn't mean that he was prepared for war. He was just preparing for a rainy day. As long as there was a slight possibility, he still didn't want a war to happen. My beloved officials, there is no need to panic. We are just making some preparations in advance. If Bugnam of Gojoseon is tactful and only occupies 3 provinces, then this war won't happen. In order to calm the officials, Zhu Qizhen spoke his thoughts. Whether it was the Great Ming dynasty or the Song dynasty, they all had a very common characteristic. They emphasized culture and suppressed martial arts. They liked to be ostriches. They buried their heads deep and only cared about their own lives. They only cared about the peaceful songs and dances in front of them. In their eyes, other than themselves, everyone else was barbaric. Everyone else was uncivilized and didn't know how to be polite. For example, fighting and killing was one of the signs of uncivilized behavior. As long as they could live a peaceful life, why would they care if other people were living in an abyss of suffering? This couldn't be said to be the mentality of all the officials, but the majority of them thought this way. Now that they heard Zhu Qizhen's words, everyone agreed. I believe that Bugnam of Gojoseon is also a reasonable person. After obtaining 3 provinces, he should be satisfied. This war won't happen. Your Majesty is wise. Your Majesty is wise. A group of officials reacted and scrambled to speak. In the imperial court, it was as if the emperor and his officials were of one mind. In this imperial court meeting, they decided to give up 3 provinces as the price to enter into peace talks with Bugnam of Gojoseon. Of course, the Ministry of Revenue and Ministry of War also began to prepare for war. After all, if the 5-star army took an inch and wanted a mile, then there was no way out. They could only fight. Zhu Qizhen was obviously not very satisfied with this result, so he left with a gloomy face. The most unlucky one was the Minister of Rights, Xie Chong. He was elected by the officials to be in charge of negotiating with Wu Nan. When he thought of Left Assistant Minister Zhou Zi on going to 3 provinces and now no one knew whether he was alive or dead, he felt that the road ahead was a little bleak. The officials left one by one. Some shook their heads and sighed, while others had gloomy faces. However, there was one person who seemed to have a lot on his mind. After he walked out of the main hall, he didn't go to his office. Instead, he went straight to the eastern district of Nanjing's capital. He felt that he should discuss with that person what happened in the imperial court today. Previously, Bugnam of Gojoseon was trapped in Yunnan Manor because of this person's idea. Perhaps he had a better way to let Yang Chendong enter the capital alone. He looked around and didn't find anyone paying attention to him. He couldn't help but quicken his pace. If there was any progress in the work of the embroidered uniform guard in these years, the biggest credit would be to the person he was going to meet. In order to persuade this person to work for him, he didn't know how much effort he had put in and how many years of planning. Finally, it was time for him to reap the rewards. If this person was discovered at this moment, then he would become the biggest sinner of the embroidered uniform guard. Qiao Jixiang, after Zhu Qizhen arrived at Nanjing's capital and became the South Emperor, publicly rebelled from Baiming. He was currently the factory manager of the embroidered uniform guard. In the entire group of eunuchs, his position was second only to the eunuch Qian Xingbao. Qiao Jixiang, who was never willing to bow down to others, used the position of the embroidered uniform guard to do a lot of work. For example, even eunuch Qian didn't know the inside story of the Yangxia traitor that he instigated. Other than him, only the emperor, Zhu Qizhen, knew. This was a little different from history, but it didn't deviate from the original. Zhu Qizhen was a person who liked to spoil eunuchs. The first one was Wang Zhen, who almost lost his life in the wooden castle. Now that he was the South Ming emperor, he quickly increased his trust in the group of eunuchs. It was because of this that Qiao Jixiang continued to work hard. In his opinion, as a eunuch, only when he reached Wang Zhen's position would he not have lived in vain. When he left the palace, he had already changed his clothes. Walking in the crowd, he looked like an ordinary person, turning and turning as he rushed to the East District. When it was about dark, he returned to the palace and secretly met with Zhu Qizhen. As for what he said after meeting the emperor, even the head of the eunuchs, Qian Xingbao, didn't know. Chapter 1607. The next morning, the Southern Ming Empire's Minister of Rites, Xia Chong, and his entourage left the capital. Outside the southern gate, many court officials came to see them off. With the anticipation of the crowd, Xia Chong stopped in front of the city gate for about an hour before reorganizing his troops and setting off. When the entourage was far away from the capital, Minister Xia let out a long sigh and muttered to himself, "You all don't want to fight with the 5-star army, but do you think this old man wants to?" However, the Southern Ming Empire's previous actions have already incurred the wrath of Bugnam of Gojoseon. How could it be so easy to make them stop fighting at this point? After saying this, Xia Chong sighed again and slowly closed his eyes. No matter what the road ahead was, since the emperor had named him and he held the position of Minister of Rites, he had to make this trip. As for whether or not he could complete the emperor's orders, he didn't have much confidence. Just as Xia Chong and his entourage were heading towards Guangxi, the 5-star army led by the world's first cavalry army and the 2nd Cold Front Division had already attacked the city. After taking down Xi City, they separately attacked Qingyuan Prefecture and Liuzhou Prefecture, all the way to Jinan Prefecture in front of Guangxi. This place would become the final barrier in front of Nanning Prefecture. Once this place was taken, Nanning Prefecture would be in front of them. At that time, the ownership of Guangxi would be decided. In Nanning Prefecture, the newly appointed Guangxi administrative minister, Bai Kuan, was like an ant on a hot pan, pacing back and forth in the main hall. From time to time, he would stop and look outside, waiting for the latest instructions from the Southern Ming Empire. Unfortunately, each time he looked, he was met with disappointment. Even now, the Southern Ming Empire still hadn't given him an explanation. This made Bai Kuan not know what to do. Defend Nanning Prefecture? To tell the truth, he didn't have much confidence. News had already come from the front lines that the 5-star army's cannons were very powerful. Fortified cities were like paper in front of them. Even if they wanted to defend, they wouldn't be able to. But should he retreat? The position of Nanning was extremely important. Without an imperial order, if he dared to retreat, the consequences that awaited him would be even more severe than dying on the battlefield. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place every day. Sometimes, he would even reflect on whether surrendering to the Southern Ming Empire was the right choice. If he had known earlier, he would have surrendered to the 5-star army. At the very least, he wouldn't be in such a difficult situation now. Reporting. Bai Kuan, who was sighing in his residence, suddenly heard a sound behind him. He reflexively turned around and saw the messenger entering the residence. His face immediately lit up and he asked anxiously, "Is there a decree from the Southern Ming dynasty?" Reporting to General, "That's not the case. It's news from the suppressing peace prefecture." The suppressing peace prefecture's garrison general has surrendered and the 5-star army has already entered the city. The messenger's voice carried a hint of fear. But all messengers preferred to report good news instead of bad news. Most of the time, it was not uncommon for soldiers who reported bad news to be beheaded on the spot. What? Hearing that the suppressing peace prefecture's garrison general had surrendered, Bai Kuan only felt a wave of dizziness. He had thought that with the strength of the 5-star army, the suppressing peace prefecture would not be able to stop them. However, they should at least fight a battle and waste some of their strength and delay some time. However, who would have thought that they would surrender without even fighting? Didn't this mean that there were no more obstacles between them and the 5-star army in the Nanning prefecture? Without any obstacles, this meant that the 5-star army's next target would be him. Right now, he didn't even know whether to fight or retreat. How could this not give him a headache? Seeing that Bai Kuan didn't have any other orders, the messenger hurriedly left, leaving the general standing alone in the main hall. No one knew what he was thinking. Suppressing peace prefecture. Having taken down this city without shedding a drop of blood, Jianghu, Xiaofeng, and the others were in a good mood. Although they had been through hundreds of battles, they had absolute confidence in taking down Guangxi. However, this time, Yang Qindong's mission was to take down the city without destroying its original appearance as much as possible. This was somewhat of a test. The Great Ming dynasty could not be compared to other places. Although some small countries or regions had some cities, the city walls were not very tall. Some of them were even just symbolic. Attacking that place would only require a cannon blast, or even a cavalry charge, and it would be easy to take it down. Because of this, the difficulty of the mission increased. However, the good thing was that the Guangxi's southern Ming army did not have a strong will to resist. Along the way, they did not encounter any large resistance. Often, when the cannon blasted, the city would quickly change hands. Now that they had reached the suppressing peace prefecture, they had directly surrendered. This gave Tianhu, Xiaofeng, and the others more confidence in completing the mission. The two of them also discussed and decided to rest in the suppressing peace prefecture for a day. The day after tomorrow, they would set off for Nanning prefecture. There might be a big battle there. Nanjing capital. The streets were surging with people, and all kinds of shouts could be heard on both sides of the street. It was very lively. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a prosperous time. They were not affected by the war in Guangxi at all. It was as if they were people from two different worlds. This was naturally affected by the lack of information, but at the same time, it was also because the imperial court had deliberately suppressed the relevant information. After all, once the people's thoughts were in chaos, it would only cause more headaches for the imperial court. In a restaurant called Wangye Restaurant, the waiter was walking quickly. From time to time, he would shout out, such as what the guests at a certain table had ordered, or how much silver had been rewarded by a certain guest's luxurious mansion. To be able to open a restaurant that could accommodate hundreds of tables in the bustling city of Jianghu, it proved that the owner was not ordinary. In fact, the owner's strength was indeed not ordinary. His surname was Yang, and his name was Wuda. Yang, Bugnam of Gojoseon, Yang Qindong's fourth brother, and the current representative of Yang Xie's business in southern Ming. Regardless of which identity he had, it was enough to shock people, and they could not help but look up to him. Over the years, after following his sixth brother out of Baiming's capital, Yang had settled down in southern Ming. At first, he only developed in Fujian, but after entering Jingdu, he could not stop and stopped there. Yang, who held the power to decide the trade with Yang Xie and had a large amount of goods, had always been someone that southern Ming merchants wanted to curry favor with. Often, in order to obtain more goods, these merchants would rack their brains to think of ways to curry favor with Yang. As time passed, Yang could not help but feel a sense of complacency. Today, one of southern Ming's biggest merchants, Lu Yuan, was inviting Yang to a banquet at Wangkuju. The Lu family had been doing business for generations, and although they were not as rich as a country, they were not far from it. As the leader of southern Ming's merchants, Lu Yuan had always had his eyes on the top of his head. It was extremely difficult for ordinary merchants to meet him. But now, he was actually standing at the entrance of Wang Kuju, as if he was waiting for someone. Those who knew Lu Yuan couldn't help but be shocked. They wondered what kind of person could make the Lu family's clan head bow down to someone else. Could it be that it was a high official in the imperial court? Regardless of whether it was Bai Ming or Southern Ming, there was one thing in common, and that was that the status of merchants was extremely low. This was especially so in front of scholars and officials. This was a reflection of the development of social status, so it was no wonder that people would think this way. However, when a merchant's business reached a certain scale, it was inevitable that they would come into contact with some people in the imperial court. This was especially so for someone like Lu Yuan. Even if he was greeting a high official in the imperial court, he would at least be an assistant minister. Only a third-rank official or above would be able to make him act like this. Just as many diners were thinking about who the guest was, Yang appeared. He was accompanied by two people who looked like servants. He held a folding fan in his hand as he appeared at the entrance of Wang Kuju. "Master Yang, you're finally here." As soon as he saw Yang appear, the originally arrogant Lu Yuan hurriedly went forward to greet him. He was like a dog that had seen its master, constantly wagging his tail. When the diners saw that it was Yang who had arrived, they immediately understood. That's right, Yang had such qualifications. Just based on the fact that he was Wu Nan Wang's fourth brother, based on the fact that he held the right to purchase Yang's items, it was normal for Lu Yuan to lower his stance like this. Considering that the Wangye restaurant was Yang's private property, most of the people who asked Yang for help would choose to treat them to a meal here. So, everything was normal. Facing Lu Yuan's lowering of his head, Yang only nodded reservedly. He was already used to this kind of thing. To put it bluntly, Yang's existence was the god of wealth for merchants. Often, whoever his goods were slightly more inclined to, that person would be able to earn a lot more. In comparison, being a little more respectful was nothing. "Brother Lu, let's go," Yang said with a smile. Even though Lu Yuan was more than 10 years older than him, and was the host of the banquet, Yang still went up first. But Yang still took the lead and walked up to the 4th floor of Wangye restaurant, which was also the place where he ate. There was only one private room on the entire 4th floor. From there, one could see a small part of Nanjing City in the distance. Please. Lu Yuan did not show the slightest bit of dissatisfaction when Yang went up first. On the contrary, he bent his waist like a lackey and extended his hands to make an inviting gesture. Yang walked in front, and Lu Yuan followed behind. They went straight to the 4th floor. Along the way, many diners hurriedly stood up to greet them. To these guests who were willing to patronize his restaurant, Yang gave them face with a smile. It was considered a greeting. Lu Yuan brought 2 servants, and Yang brought 2 servants. The group of 6 was about to pass through the main hall and turn the corner on the 1st floor. Seeing that they had already reached the stairs and were about to go up to the 2nd floor, a few people happened to come down. They were not tall, and were even a little short. The group of 5 lowered their heads and went straight down. Chapter 1608. Suddenly, there were 5 people in front of them. One of the servants who came with Yang instinctively walked to the front and put on a defensive posture. His main task was to protect the safety of the 4th master. He absolutely couldn't allow any accidental discovery. Yang only frowned at the servant's rush and didn't say anything. He didn't think that there would be anyone who would harm him in his own restaurant. Moreover, he came to this banquet on a whim. Not many people knew about it in advance. Just as Yang frowned, before his eyebrows could completely relax, a sword light suddenly flashed. The servant's body was already soaked in blood. Soon after, a line of blood spurted out from his neck, and the blood splattered about a foot high. The red blood was reflected in Yang's eyes. Ah! Yang screamed, and his body retreated as if out of instinct. Another figure also rushed out with this shout. He leaped in front of Yang Yang and used his body to block the second sword attack. Once again, blood spurted out. The remaining servants' clothes were also stained with blood. The opponent's movements were too fast. Although the two servants who followed him immediately rushed out and lost their lives, they still couldn't block the opponent's third sword attack. Moreover, the sword light flashed and directly slashed in front of Yang Yang's neck. The folding fan in his hand blocked in front of his chest. Several gusts of wind flew out and rushed towards the incoming assassin. This was one of Yang Yang's life-saving methods, the power of the folding fan. This wasn't an ordinary folding fan. It was a folding fan with hidden mechanisms. It could shoot out dozens of steel needles at the same time. If the distance was too close, these steel needles could penetrate the body and kill the assassin. The steel needles moved and flew through the air, piercing into the assassin who was completely unprepared. Immediately, the assassin's body trembled. Next, white foam came out of his mouth. Then, with a plop, he fell down between the stairs. And all of this happened in the blink of an eye. After a short period of time, Lu Yuan finally reacted and shouted, "Save him." Then, he rushed towards Yang Yang. The folding fan in his hand was his last life-saving weapon. Now that he had used it, Yang Yang had no other way out. Lu Yuan was about to pounce on him, and out of instinct, he wanted to turn around and elbow him. But Lu Yuan's voice rang out, "Fourth master, nothing must happen to you. Nothing must happen to you." After saying that, Lu Yuan exerted force and pressed Yang Yang under his body. It was also at this moment that a sword intent slashed down and struck him in the back. Under the powerful force, a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of Lu Yuan's mouth. Lu Yuan was using his life to protect Yang Yang. It turned out that in such a short period of time, the two attendants brought by Lu Yuan were also killed by the assassin. If Lu Yuan had not used his life to block the sword, the one who would have been injured would have been Yang Yang himself. None of the assassinations were effective, and the most likely attack was blocked by Lu Yuan's life. The 5 assassins became angry. They were all ninjas, and the best among the ninjas. Assassination was as simple as drinking water and eating in their eyes. But now, under the surprise attack, they didn't succeed. They couldn't help but feel a little anxious. The 5 of them shouted and jumped straight down the stairs. Because of the narrow stairs, they made the first move, which also made Yang Yang lose his vigilance. Because of this, 2 of his attendants died, and the 2 attendants brought by Lu Yuan also died. But also because of the narrow stairs, the ninja's range of movement was limited, so they couldn't rush to Yang Yang who was rolling down the stairs. Yang Yang and Lu Yuan hugged each other, and under the impact of the powerful sword, they rolled down the stairs, so they temporarily escaped the assassination of the ninjas. As soon as they landed, more than a dozen people rushed to the stairs. They were all the staff of Wuxia restaurant. Some of them were waiters, some of them were waiters, some of them were shopkeepers, and even some of them were kitchen staff. Wuxia restaurant was Yang Yang's property, so the people here were naturally his staff. Now that the boss was in trouble, everyone naturally chose to rush out. Of course, this wasn't because Yang Yang was good to everyone, making them grateful to him and willing to face death. It was because everyone knew Yang Yang's identity. If he died here today, and they didn't save him, they were afraid that Bugnam of Gojoseon would know about this matter, and they would face a life worse than death. More than a dozen people rushed up and blocked the 5 ninjas. Yang Yang finally had time to stand up from the ground. Looking at Lu Yuan in his arms, his face was pale, and his body was cold due to excessive bleeding. He couldn't help but shout, Brother Lu, hold on, hold on." Yang Yang was still concerned about Lu Yuan's injuries. In front of the stairs, there were already corpses, and the smell of blood spread out. There were only a dozen people. Although they were tough, they were just relying on brute force. How could they be a match for 5 ninjas? Fortunately, as time passed, more and more people rushed up. To be able to become a famous restaurant in Kyoto, there were a lot of staff here. More and more people rushed out and finally blocked the ninja's surprise attack. Finally, someone took Lu Yuan from Yang Yang's hands, but it seemed that his situation wasn't good. Yang Yang, who was finally able to get up, reached out his hand and took out a Type 54 pistol from his waist. He opened the safety and fired at the 5 ninjas who were fighting. This time, he almost died in the hands of the other party, which made him scared and angry at the same time. Bang bang bang, gunshots rang out. Other than the first shot that suddenly injured a ninja, the other shots all missed. Not only did they not injure the ninja, but they also killed some of the restaurant staff. Bastard. Looking at the Type 54 pistol that had no more bullets, Yang Yang was a little regretful. He had this pistol with him for a long time, but he was too lazy to practice shooting. Now that it was time to use it, he regretted not working hard. Gunshots rang out, and the entire Wangye restaurant's hall became chaotic. Some diners ran out of the restaurant as fast as they could. In their view, it was too dangerous to stay here. Although Yang Yang was in trouble, it was a great opportunity for many people. If they really saved Yang Yang here, the benefits would be beyond their imagination. But if they wanted to do something, they first had to look at their own strength. If they rushed to save someone, they would only lose their life. Then, no one was willing to do it. The hall became more chaotic because of the people fleeing in panic. At this time, Yang Yang loaded another magazine into the Type 54 pistol, but at this moment, he couldn't calm down at all. He knew his own shooting skills, especially when he saw his own people. This time, more and more people died, and those 5 assassins, the one who was shot had already retreated. Other than bandaging his wound, the other 4 assassins were still intact. He felt that the situation was serious. Yang Yang had a feeling that these assassins were determined to kill him. Inside the restaurant, at least the waiters were able to put up a fight. But once he left the restaurant, then no one would be able to help him. Perhaps a single sword strike would be enough to make him fall to the ground and turn him into a corpse. Everything happened too fast. From the time when the servants around him were injured to now when the people in the restaurant ran away, it was not even half an incense stick's worth of time. It would take at least half an incense stick's worth of time for the nearby soldiers to arrive. The question was, could they hold on until then? Yang Yang's heart was very anxious, and the assassins were also very anxious. The more time passed, the more unfavorable it would be for them. Originally, they thought that this mission would be very easy to complete, especially after they learned in advance that Yang Yang would appear here. They were even more confident. If everything went smoothly, perhaps as long as they met face to face, they could complete the mission of assassinating the target. But who would have thought that until now, the target was still safe and sound? Although the opponents in front of them were getting fewer and fewer, who knew if other accidents would suddenly appear? We will block them here, you go and kill the target. The leader of the 5 assassins saw that if this dragged on, it was very likely that an accident would happen, so he changed his sword style and slashed out fiercely. He relied on his excessive momentum to force the waiters in front of him to retreat. Taking advantage of this time, one of the jonins in front of him shouted loudly and jumped into the air. He actually jumped over the waiters and jumped to the periphery, and also came in front of Yang Yang who was holding a gun. What are you doing? Seeing the assassin jump in front of him, Yang Yang instinctively raised his gun and aimed at the other party. The black muzzle of the gun was pointed at him, and the jonin couldn't help but tremble as he stood in place. As a former member of the Yangxia, ninjas were very clear about the power of the flintlock. Especially the Yangxia's flintlock, as long as one was hit by it, there would be very few good results. Now that the muzzle was in front of him, it would be a lie to say that he was not nervous at all. But when he noticed that Yang Yang's whole arm was constantly shaking because of nervousness, the jonin felt that the opportunity was coming, and suddenly his body swayed to the right, then turned to the left and rushed over. As soon as the jonin moved, Yang Yang also moved, and the muzzle of the gun was pointed to the right and fired. When the gunshot sounded, he found that the assassin was rushing over from the left. He was shocked, and no longer cared about anything else. He waved his hand and threw out the 54 style. It must be said that Yang Yang also practiced some martial arts. At that time, a gentleman had 6 skills, and he was born in the Yang family, so he was taught by a famous teacher. Unfortunately, he hasn't exercised for a long time, and coupled with the rich life, his body was not as flexible as before. After the 54 style was thrown out, it only made the opponent stop for less than half a breath of time. Then, he held the sword and rushed over. The sword wind whistled through the air and went straight to Yang Yang's neck. Chapter 1609. My life is over. After Yang Yang shouted, he closed his eyes. At this moment, he could even feel the piercing pain of the sword wind slicing through his throat. Dang! A crisp sound rang out. It was the sound of weapons clashing against each other. Then, there was a gust of cold wind, followed by the sound of more weapons clashing. After waiting for a moment, Yang Yang found that he was not dead. He opened his eyes and saw Yang Lu blocking in front of him. At this moment, there was a scratch on Yang Lu's right arm, and blood was flowing out from it. Needless to say, at the critical moment, Yang Lu must have rushed out to help him avoid the fatal blow. But because of this, Yang Lu was also injured. Who is Yang Lu? He is one of the 5 servants of the Bugnam of Gojoseon, Yang Chendong, and his skills were quite good. But later, because of some mistakes, he was sent to the southern Ming kingdom by Yang Chendong, and was responsible for managing the intelligence here. In the eyes of many people, he was already a marginalized person. Because of this, he used to drink to drown his sorrows for a period of time, and his physical condition was far worse than before. Because of this, the moment Yang Lu fought, he was injured. How is it? Lu Zi, are you okay? Yang Yang hurriedly came forward and asked with a trace of concern. Fourth master, this little one is fine. Yang Lu smiled at Yang Yang, and then his face flashed with a ruthless expression. He said to the butler Yang Ying and the others who followed him, all of you go together and kill these assassins. Right, try to leave them alive. After Yang Lu shouted angrily, he turned around and knelt down in front of Yang Yang. Fourth master, this little one just received the news and rushed over. I have frightened you. It's okay, you came at the right time. Yang Yang also sighed in fear. Fortunately, Yang Lu came in time. It seems that Yang Xie's intelligence network is indeed very powerful. He can even get information about an assassination attempt. Yang Lu came with dozens of experts from the intelligence department's action department. Most importantly, these operatives were all holding pistols in their hands, which was very impressive. No matter how powerful you are, can you win against a gun? Wouldn't it be 1 in 1,000 to be selected to join the operations division of the intelligence department? 1 in 100, 1 in a dozen, 1 in a dozen, 1 in a flower, 1 in a flower. Naturally, their marksmanship wasn't as bad as Yang Yang's. When they fired their pistols, 4 of the 5 Jonans were killed on the spot. The other one was only shot in the body because they wanted to keep him alive, but his vital parts were fine. Capture him alive and ask him who ordered them to do this. Seeing that the situation was settled, Yang Lu heaved a sigh of relief and shouted loudly. Don't come over. The last remaining Jonin waved the ninja sword in his hand and placed it on his neck, threatening to kill himself if anyone came over. This action really made the members of the operations department stand rooted to the ground, not knowing what to do. You can save him once, but can you save him 10 times, or even 100 times? Let me tell you, since we have set him as our target, we will definitely kill him. Today, we were just careless, it won't be long before you die, I will wait for you on the ground, ha ha ha. After a burst of laughter and clamor, the sharp ninja sword in the Jonin's hand instantly cut his throat, and with a spurt of blood, he fell to the ground with a plop. When the members of the operations department walked forward, they found that the Jonin was no longer breathing. 5 assassins died just like that, without a single survivor. All of this was seen by Yang Yang's eyes. He should be happy, but he didn't know why. At this moment, he didn't feel happy at all. Only the words that some people said before they died flashed in his mind. You can save him once, but can you save him 10 times, or even 100 times? Yang Yang couldn't understand who hated him to the bone and wanted to kill him. But he knew that this place was no longer safe. In other words, the entire Nanjing prefecture was no longer safe. Before killing the person behind the scenes, he must leave here and find an absolutely safe place. Then where would it be safer? Without much thought, the name of Resin City appeared in his mind. Yang suddenly grabbed Yang Lu's arm and said, "Lu Zi, immediately arrange something. I want to leave here. I want to go back to Resin City." "Oh right, you have to personally bring people to escort me." This is no problem. But shouldn't we report it to the young master?" Yang Lu revealed a difficult expression. "No need, I'm his fourth brother. When we reach Resin City, I will tell him." Yang shook his head. He didn't want to stay here for a moment longer. He just wanted to hurry back to Resin City, otherwise, he wouldn't even dare to close his eyes and sleep. "All right." Yang Lu could only say reluctantly. After all, Yang was the young master's fourth brother, and was also one of his own masters. As a servant, he could only obey unconditionally. Yang left, and Yang Lu brought over 100 members of the intelligence department to protect him. They went straight to Fujian. There was a ship specially sent to Resin City. It was also the nearest way home. Although he had left, what he left behind for the Southern Ming dynasty was a mess. There was no need to talk about Yang Lu's identity. Luckily he didn't suffer any injuries. Otherwise, he really didn't know how to explain it to Bugnam of Gojoseon. The current situation was already a little tense, and the development of the situation had greatly exceeded the expectations of the Southern Ming. If a war really broke out now, how could the Southern Ming that wasn't fully prepared be their opponent? Perhaps a war would break out one day, but it definitely wasn't now. Hence, Yang Lu's problem at this time was indeed a headache. From the report of the genie guards, the 5 assassins were all dead, no one was alive. The Southern Ming imperial court was even more depressed. It would be better if they caught the real culprit. It would be best if they could interrogate the mastermind. That way, the Southern Ming would be able to remove themselves from this problem. However, the problem now was that the assassins were all dead, and the identity of the culprit had become a mystery. If this pot of shit wasn't handled properly, the Southern Ming imperial court would have to bear the responsibility. Investigate carefully and find out who did it. The Southern Ming imperial court isn't afraid of trouble, but we definitely won't be casually used by others. Ingzong Zhu Qizhen gave the order, and the genie guards in the city immediately moved. However, facing an extremely well-organized assassin organization, how could it be so easy to find the mastermind? In the end, after investigating, they still couldn't find any clues. Yang Qindong also received a telegram from the Security Bureau 4 hours after the incident. "Someone wants to harm fourth brother?" Yang Qindong suddenly stood up, his entire face terrifyingly cold. Dragons had reverse scales, and one of Yang Qindong's reverse scales was his family and loved ones. Investigate the ins and outs of this matter clearly. I want to know all the details of this matter. Yang Qindong was angry. The pitiful one was the head of the Security Bureau, Yang San. After he received the order, he immediately decided to set off for the Nanjing Imperial Court. However, before he left, he reported a clue that he had just found to Yang Qindong. "Young master, we have a new clue about the transmitter of 9826. Nanning Imperial Court." Bai Kuan stood on top of the city gate tower, wearing a suit of armor. In the past 2 days, after countless psychological struggles, he finally made a decision before he received the Southern Ming Imperial Court's decree. That was to fight against the 5-star army. There was a high possibility that he would lose this battle, but he still had to do it. Since he had already surrendered to the Southern Ming Imperial Court, he could only walk this path to the end. He had once surrendered to the Southern Ming Imperial Court from the 3 provinces army. If he surrendered to the 5-star army from the Southern Ming Imperial Court, wouldn't he be like Lu Bu, a slave of 3 surnames? Think about it, Lu Bu was the #1 general during the 3 Kingdoms era, but what good end did he have at that time, and what good reputation did he have today? No. Just the sign of a slave of 3 surnames nailed him to the pillar of shame, never to rise again. With such a living example in front of him, Baikuan didn't want to be such a person. Of course, the most important thing that prompted him to make such a decision was that the day after he surrendered to the Southern Ming Imperial Court and met Zhou Xiang, his family was forced to be sent to the capital of the Southern Ming Imperial Court. Gloriously, it was to protect his family and let them go to the capital to enjoy life. However, no one could see that this was simply treating his family as hostages. For the safety of his family, Baikuan could only do this. After making the decision, all the soldiers in the Nanning Imperial Court were gathered by him. In order to increase the chances of defending the city, he even ordered people to gather all the men, women, and children in the city. He was already prepared to perish together. This time, even if he lost, he wanted to label the 5-star army as immoral. As for himself, as long as his family was safe, he didn't care if he died. It had to be said that Baikuan's decision was very bold. Especially the action of gathering all the men, women, and children in the city onto the city gate tower, it could be said to be a combination of despicable and shameless. This was because the moment the 5-star army attacked the other cities, using the cannons, it was inevitable that ordinary civilians would be blasted to death. Didn't Bugnam of Gojoseon say that he wanted to lead all the Han people to the peak of the world and let them live a good life? Alright, I'll place the people on the city gate tower and see if you dare to fire. If you do, you'll be slapping your own face. At that time, who will believe you? Yi Zichen thought. Alright. Amidst the weeping and crying, the city gate tower was filled with mournful wails. The civilians didn't know what kind of impact they would have on the city gate tower. They only knew that now that they were pushed to the front lines, they would become cannon fodder if they didn't do well. Because of this, they all cursed Baikuan's 8 generations of ancestors in their hearts. Chapter 1610. However, this kind of greeting was obviously useless. How could a person who wasn't even afraid of death be afraid of being cursed by others? Finally, while Baikuan was waiting, the 5-star army began to appear below the city wall. They're finally here. Let's see what you're going to do. Baikuan was wearing a full body armor. After looking from afar, he hid behind the civilians. He decided not to show his face and not give the 5-star army a chance to question and scold him. Otherwise, if he was really questioned, it wouldn't look good for him. Are they preparing for a battle? Tian Hu rode forward on his horse. When he took out his binoculars and looked, he couldn't help but curse when he put it down. This Baikuan is really a bastard. That's right, he is indeed a bastard. However, it will be difficult for us to do next. Division Commander Xiao Feng also put down his binoculars. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. They couldn't be blamed for being so angry. Who would have thought that Baikuan would push the commoners onto the city gate tower? If that was the case, they would inevitably hit the commoners if they wanted to fire. If that was the case, just the words of the scholars and the mouths of the celestials would be enough to make it difficult for the commoners to defend themselves. What should we do? The two of them looked at each other at almost the same time. As the highest-ranking officers in this army, the two of them felt the pressure at this moment. It even made them feel a little breathless. Let's ask the 6th young master. Tian Hu thought for a while and made a decision. Okay, but you have to report it secretly, Xiao Feng added after hearing that. Why did they have to send the message secretly? It was because they didn't want the 6th young master to be the scapegoat. As a subordinate, as a subject, they had to share the burden of their master. If they sent the message openly, where would they put Yang Chendong? Fight? If that was the case, the crime of indiscriminate killing of civilians would fall on Yang Chendong's head. The history books wouldn't record it well. Retreat without fighting? If that's the case, how are we going to solve the problem in Guangxi? However, if they were to fight without asking for permission, what if the 6th young master had a better idea or had other plans? Wouldn't that be tantamount to ruining the 6th young master's plans? They couldn't bear such a crime. Therefore, they had to send a telegram, but they had to send a secret telegram. This way, they could know Yang Chendong's thoughts and solve this problem. Even if the two of them had to take the blame in the end, as long as the sixth young master knew the whole story, even if he punished them, it wouldn't be too heavy. The 5-star army began to set up their formation outside the city. The secret message was also sent out and sent to the head of the intelligence department, Wang Shan. Then, it was quickly placed in front of Yang Qindong, who was still in the palace of the 3 provinces. Yang Qindong was shocked when he saw the telegram. He remembered that during the War of Resistance against Japan, there was a time when the Japanese took the civilians to attack the army of D, which gave the People's Army a headache. He didn't expect that such a scene would happen to him. Come, bring me Bai Kuan's information. Since it was something that might happen, Yang Qindong was naturally prepared for it. However, he still needed to understand more about the situation before that. After all, his approach could solve the problem once, but it didn't mean that it could be solved every time. Once the other party was on guard, it would be much more difficult to solve such a problem in the future. Wang Shan quickly sent the information about Bai Kuan to Yang Qindong. Okay, put the information here first. Call back to Tianhu and Xiaofeng. Tell them to wait. Don't act rashly before there are new orders. When the telegram reached Nanning, Tianhu and General Xiaofeng breathed a sigh of relief. Since the 6th young master had given instructions, they only needed to follow it. As for the problem in front of them, they would definitely get a perfect solution. In the eyes of the generals, since this was an order from Yang Qindong, the problem would definitely be solved. This was also the result of many years of trust. Bai Kuan, who was on the top floor of Nanning Prefecture, didn't know about this. He only saw the 5-star army stop at the bottom of the city and didn't dare to attack. He was immediately overjoyed. He thought that he had found a good way to curb the development of the 5-star army. For this reason, he had even specially written a memorial and had it sent to the capital at the fastest speed possible. Before his memorial could reach the capital, a tragedy happened in the capital. In the courtyard that the Southern Ming dynasty had arranged for Bai Kuan's family, in just one night, people and animals were all killed. From the elderly to the children, even the dogs, chickens, and other animals they raised were all killed. No one survived. From the top to the bottom of the dozens of people, no one was able to breathe. The seriousness of the case and the cruelty of the methods, even if the Southern Ming dynasty wanted to hide it, they couldn't. In just one morning, the news had spread throughout the entire Yingtian prefecture, Nanjing prefecture. What was even worse was that the murderer had left words on the wall. The words were written in blood. The first bailiff to enter the courtyard could see it very clearly. It was very eye-catching. Clearly, this was Yang Qindong's method of revenge. Yang Qindong had never been a peaceful person. Especially towards those who were his enemies, he would never be lenient. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gained so much territory and influence in such a short period of time. Bai Kuan wanted to use the common people to threaten him, so he could only use a thunderous method to get rid of his family. Although the process was somewhat cruel, in order to prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future, he could only be forced to do this. The facts also proved that this had indeed intimidated many people with bad intentions. They didn't care about their own life and death, because that was their mission. But for their entire family to be killed, it was obviously something they didn't want to see. It was enough to make them feel afraid. Yang Qindong used facts to tell everyone that on the battlefield, it didn't matter how the two sides fought. That was the fate of a soldier, and it was his duty. But if you wanted to play tricks behind his back, sorry, then you had to have enough courage to bear everything. If you didn't have such a mind and spirit, then it was best to play according to the rules of the game. Regarding these things, Bai Kuan was completely unaware because of the lack of communication. He was still proud of his method of forcing the common people to go upstairs and intimidating the 5-star army. On the evening of the 3rd day, the 5-star army's camp outside the city welcomed Tai Hu and a group of Lengia Special Forces members. Tai Hu and the others were prepared by Yang Qindong to help Tianhu and Xiaofeng solve the problem. Captain Tai. Tianhu and Xiaofeng both saluted and greeted. Tai Hu, who had the rank of Major General, also laughed and raised his arm to salute. The two of you have higher ranks than me, I should be the one saluting the two of you. In terms of military rank, both Jianghu and Shaofeng were lieutenant generals, and they both had 2 gold stars. But they knew that people like Tai who couldn't be judged by military rank. Everyone knew that although the Langya Special Forces had the least number of people, their combat power was very high. They specialized in completing difficult missions that a large army couldn't. Of course, the most important point was that the Langya Special Forces members weren't under the jurisdiction of the 5-star Army's army. They were under their own rule and were only under the control of Yang Chendong. Even if the 6th young master wasn't around, they would only listen to the eldest prince, who was also Yang Xie's successor, Yang Bo's orders. Just based on this, they couldn't be compared to him. Both sides were familiar with each other. After all, they had trained together in the early days and had many years of camaraderie. Now that they were gathered together, they couldn't help but warm up. After connecting, Taihu told Yang Chendong about some of the things that Yang Chendong had instructed him to do before he came here. Generals, the 6th young master wants you to assist us. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Since it was Yang Chendong's order, Tianhu and Shaofeng naturally didn't have any objections. After nodding their heads, they said in unison, "We will obey the 6th young master's order. Captain Tai, please tell us what to do." "Okay, then I'll be overconfident." Taihu laughed, then walked to the sand table and began to arrange the combat mission. The morning of the 4th day. The weather was beautiful, and the wind was gentle and the sun was bright. The sun hung high in the sky, and there weren't even many white clouds. Bai Kun slept until dawn. When he woke up in the morning, he looked up at the sky and couldn't help but sigh. Good weather. Then, with the help of his bodyguards, he put on his armor and went up the city gate tower. Before they could reach the top of the city wall, someone had already reported that the 5-star army had started to move. The 5-star army's field cannons had also started to advance. What? Do they really dare? Hearing this, Bai Kun's face tensed up. He was most afraid that the 5-star army would disregard all criticism and launch a fierce attack. In this way, although the other side would also be criticized by the public, the first to die would be him. This was something he absolutely didn't want to see. He hurriedly went up the city gate tower and saw the cannons continuously moving forward. Not only that, the 5-star army also split up. A large number of cavalry moved towards the north and south gates. What are they doing? Bai Kun was puzzled at first. After thinking it through, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. What? Do they want to play a trick of surprise? Then you are destined to miscalculate. On the other city gate towers, I have also arranged for many civilians. Unless you dare to risk universal condemnation, you can dream of attacking the city. The 5-star army's actions didn't make Bai Kun feel afraid. He had a feeling that the other side was just bluffing. They wouldn't dare to casually attack civilians. Since that was the case, what was there for him to worry about? Bai Kun's heart calmed down. However, what he didn't know was that in the sky above him, there was an air force flying over. Chapter 1611. Strictly speaking, this was not a real air force. It was a mobile air force unit made up of powered umbrellas. They were different from the real air force. They didn't need to use hot air balloons to fly. They only needed one person with a single umbrella to fly and then control the landing to any designated location. This air force unit was made up of the Wolf-Fang Special Forces members. The so-called strong army mostly referred to the land tigers. After the navy, there was the name of the sea dragon. After that, there was the air force, and then there was the name of the sky eagle. These were the 3 armies of the future. For a time, the 3 armies had their own things to do. Unless there was a difficult battle, they would join forces to fight and display more power. But there was an army that had the advantages of the 3 armies. They could fly, go into the sea, and even fight on land. They were the members of the Wolf-Fang Special Forces. This time, using the powered umbrellas to fight in the air was Yang Chendong's method to break through the situation. When the order was given to Captain Tai Hu, he gladly accepted it. This kind of training was very mysterious in the eyes of other armies. But for the Wolf-Fang Special Forces, it was a piece of cake. They didn't know how many times they had trained like this. They had already reached the realm of advancing and retreating freely. Today, it was time for them to test the results. After all, the training was for battle. Now, it was finally time to use it. Hundreds of powered umbrellas rose above Nanning Prefecture and then glided down towards the city. Every soldier had their own clear goal, and they were already familiar with it last night. Now, what they needed to do was to quickly enter the city and kill their way out. They needed to seize the East City Gate and create an excellent opportunity for the main force of the 5-star army to enter the city. As for whether the 300 members of the Wolf-Fang Special Forces could complete this mission, there was no need to worry. Every one of them was equipped with a Type 95 submachine gun and was fully loaded with bullets. This was enough to ensure that they would be able to form the greatest combat power and achieve the military objective. Bai Kuan still didn't know about all this. His eyes were still on the 5-star army. He wanted to see what kind of tricks they were going to play so that he could react accordingly. On top of every city tower, inside every city gate, he had arranged for a large number of civilians to gather here. As long as the 5-star army dared to open fire, they would definitely blow up innocent civilians. This way, they would have to take the blame. If they didn't want to take the blame, they couldn't use the cannons to bombard them, and they wouldn't be able to enter the city. As long as he couldn't enter the city, he had nothing to be afraid of. Previously, he had already transferred the entire Guangxi region's army into the Nan clan manor. There were over 30,000 soldiers in the city, which was more than enough to defend the 4 city walls and the city gates. As time passed, the Southern Ming imperial court would definitely send reinforcements when they saw that he was stuck here like a nail. At that time, the entire Nanning prefecture would be saved. Bai Kuan even thought that at that time, he might be the true hero of the Southern Ming dynasty. In his heart, he was still dreaming about the beautiful future. He didn't know that nearly 300 people of the 5-star army had already passed over his head. Moreover, the power umbrella made a loud noise. This was because the 5-star army cavalry was moving on a large scale, so the sound was covered by the sound of the horses' hooves. This wasn't because Bai Kuan was careless, but because he didn't know what the 5-star army was capable of. In fact, it wasn't just him, even Tian Hu and Xiao Feng were considered the core members of the 5-star army. However, they didn't know what the power umbrella was and why it was so powerful. It was because of this that Yang Chendong was so mysterious. Because they didn't know what more powerful methods their master had yet to use, it made their hearts filled with awe and respect for the 6th young master even more. Using the cover, the Wolf-Fang Special Forces successfully flew to the sky above Nanning Prefecture. Then, they slowed down and began to move towards the East Gate. In comparison, the East Gate was the furthest away from the 5-star army's main force, and the defense was also the most lax. At least until now, they hadn't seen any sign of the 5-star army outside the East Gate. Without any opponents, their vigilance naturally decreased a lot. This also created better conditions and opportunities for the Wolf-Fang Special Forces to attack. Hoo-hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo-hoo, one after another, the power umbrellas flew over and arrived at the street closest to the East Gate. This was also thanks to Bai Kuan's cooperation. If he didn't bring all the people in the city to the city tower and the gate, the whereabouts of Tian Hu and the others would definitely attract some people's attention. But now, there was no one on the street, so they could hide their whereabouts quietly. Then, they closed the umbrellas and gathered. They gathered the power umbrellas together and placed them in an empty courtyard. Then, they started to check the equipment and personnel. There were a total of 288 people in this trip. Except for one person who stepped on a roof when he landed and suffered a slight ankle injury, the rest of the people stood in front of them unharmed. Tian Hu faced 287 people. His face was a little red and he was very excited. He knew that after this battle, the name of the Wolf Fang Special Forces would be completely known. Leave 18 people behind to guard the equipment. The remaining 270 people will be divided into 9 teams, each team has 30 people. Search in a fan shape and move towards the east gate. Remember, unless you encounter the enemy's main force, it's better not to fire if you don't have to. Do you understand? Tianhu asked loudly. In the entire team, except for the 18 people who were about to be left behind, the rest of the 270 people answered in unison. If it weren't for the fact that they were in the enemy's heart and couldn't shout loudly, their shouts would have caused the earth to shake. In the following time, they formed the teams. Except for the injured person, 17 people were left behind unwillingly to guard the equipment. The other 9 teams were quickly organized and then followed their respective team leaders to search in the direction of the target. When the Wolf Fang Special Forces was established, one of the earliest tasks was to carry out the beheading operation. Therefore, their vigilance was extremely high. For example, how to camouflage and move forward in the enemy's rear was their specialty. 9 teams with a total of 270 people moved together. This could be said to be the biggest operation of the Wolf Fang Special Forces in the enemy's rear. Everyone knew the importance of this task, so they were very careful when they moved forward. No one wanted to drag the whole team down because of their own reasons. The result of their concerted efforts was that they were not discovered by anyone until they moved to the east gate. Team 3 and Team 4 will take the initiative to attack. The other teams will protect them. If things go wrong, you can choose to shoot. When they moved to a place 1 mile away from the east gate, Tianhu made a gesture to stop the team and start to arrange the situation. 5 minutes later, Teams 3 and 4 with a total of 60 people became the first echelon. They walked out of the darkness and moved toward the east gate, which was slightly empty. These 60 soldiers were all wearing the military uniform of the South Ming Army. This was one of the items they had obtained when they encountered the patrol team of the South Ming Army. Now was the time to borrow this flag. Outside the east gate, the soldiers of the South Ming Army stood in a mess. Some of them had even leaned against the bricks below the city gate tower, closing their eyes to rest or taking a short nap. The soldiers would only open their eyes when the civilians under the city gate moved. Then, they would reveal a ferocious look, warning and threatening the innocent civilians not to move. Otherwise, the consequences would be very serious. When Tai Hu and the others saw this through the binoculars, they gritted their teeth in hatred. Was this how the strong bullied the weak and the strong bullied the weak? Did they only know how to threaten the defenseless civilians? What kind of ability was this? Fortunately, Teams 3 and 4 attacked at this moment. It was time to save the civilians. They were all wearing the military uniform of the South Ming Army and looked like they had just returned from a patrol. Even if some of the South Ming Army saw them, they did not think much of it and continued to do what they were supposed to do. After all, they were on the same side and there was nothing to be suspicious about. 400 meters. 300 meters. 150 meters. When they were finally 50 to 60 steps away, those with good eyesight could clearly see the faces of the other party. A chiliarch of the South Ming Army had a puzzled expression on his face. He realized that he did not recognize a single one of the South Ming Army. He did not even recognize a single one of them. This unexpected situation attracted the attention of the chiliarch. He could not help but shout, "Which general are you under? Why do you look so unfamiliar?" This shout also attracted the attention of the other South Ming Army soldiers. Everyone looked at these people with puzzled expressions. The captain of the third team was Shou Ho. He had already expected this to happen and did not panic. Instead, he laughed and said, "I am General Bai Kuan's personal guard. This time, I am here to inspect you. I say, your vigilance is not bad. The city gate is so tightly sealed. You can't be thinking that the 5-star army is so resourceful that they can fly into the city, right?" This explanation immediately attracted a wave of laughter. It was clear that everyone had the same thought. They did not think that the 5-star army could enter the city with such a tight seal. In addition, Shou-ho said that he was Lord Bai Kuan's personal guard. Just this identity alone was enough to make everyone look up to him. So it is Lord Personal Guard. Forgive my poor eyesight. Hee, quickly come and rest. The Chiliarch revealed a fawning smile. Chapter 1612. Since someone invited him, Shou-ho naturally wouldn't be polite. He called the members of Squad 3 and 4 and strode towards the East City Gate. While walking, they also intentionally tidied up the long backpack behind them. It contained the 95 style. Completely caught off guard, Shou-ho brought his men to the side of the Chiliarch. The other members also began to move closer to the other soldiers of the Southern Ming Army. A silent killing intent was spreading. The Chiliarch seemed to be a chatterbox, but he also seemed to have a friendly personality. When he saw Skinny Monkey standing in front of him, he walked up with a smile. Then, he noticed the long cloth bag and asked curiously, "Lord Bodyguard, may I know what this is?" "Why? Do you want to know?" Shou-ho didn't have any intention to refuse. He smiled and took the long cloth from his back and placed it in front of the Chiliarch. "Ah. Can I see it?" "In that case, I'd like to broaden my horizons," the Chiliarch chuckled with an intrigued look on his face. It seemed that everyone was very curious about the unknown. At this moment, not only the Chiliarch, but the other Southern Ming soldiers also came to the side of the Langia Special Forces members with curious looks. Even the Southern Ming soldiers who were responsible for guarding the civilians also gathered. "Oh, I see. Then I'll show it to you. This is the secret weapon prepared by Lord Bai Kuan." Skinny Monkey-like laughed, then gave a look to the other Special Forces members. Then, the long cloth strip was slowly opened, and the black gun body appeared in front of the Southern Ming soldiers. Most of these Southern Ming soldiers were people who rebelled with the three provinces King Zhuhuitu. But after Bai Kuan surrendered to the Southern Ming Army, they also changed and became part of the Southern Ming Army. For people like them, their military quality was very ordinary, not to mention their knowledge. For people like them, firearms were something they had only heard of and had never seen with their own eyes. Not to mention the extremely advanced 95 style. When this thing was taken out, they only knew that it was an iron lump. As for what it was used for, they had no idea at all. Shou-ho and the other members took out the 95 style in front of the enemy, then held it in their hands and pulled the safety. "How is it? Have you never seen him before?" "Let me tell you, this is the newest firearm. Its name is the 95 style. How about this, there's no point in just talking about it. I'll show you all their might so that everyone will have more confidence when it comes to defending the city." Yes. Let us take a look and we will be more confident." The Southern Ming soldiers nodded in agreement. They didn't know that at this time, they had already taken a step into the gates of hell. Skinny Monkey and the others didn't expect things to go so smoothly. Each of the team members quickly communicated with each other with their eyes. Skinny Monkey even straightforwardly made a hand gesture. This was not only for the 59 team members beside him to see, but also for Captain Tai Tiger, who was a mile away. He was sending the signal to attack. Fire. Everything was ready. The Chiliarch was still standing together with the soldiers, waiting to watch the show. Suddenly, they realized that the black muzzles were pointed at them. Before they could react and understand what was going on, gunshots rang out. Bullets flew out from the muzzles as if they had eyes and hit their bodies. In exchange, the Southern Ming soldiers fell to the ground one after another. Their bodies were strangely identical, with bullet holes that were bleeding. At such a close distance, and when the enemy wasn't prepared, the 1,000 Southern Ming soldiers didn't even have time to react before they fell to the ground one by one. The originally bustling East City Tower instantly became much more spacious. Charge! Tai Tiger was overjoyed when he saw all of this. Skinny Monkey and the others had successfully completed their mission and occupied the East City Gate. Now, it was time for him to launch his attack. He stood up and gave the order to the other members of the Special Forces to charge. At the same time, he raised his hand and shot a red signal flare into the sky, signaling to the 5-star army cavalry outside the city to attack. The first to be frightened by the sudden change on the city tower were the commoners who were driven into the city. Just a moment ago, they saw the Southern Ming soldiers surrounding Skinny Monkey and the others. But in just a short while, all of them fell to the ground and became corpses. What kind of powerful weapons were these people holding? Also, if these people wanted to attack them with guns, what should they do? Wait for death? Even at this time, the commoners were still cowering and huddling together. No one thought of resisting with their lives. It had to be said that this was also a kind of tragedy. Someone once said that when the Japanese invaded China, 2 Japanese soldiers were enough to watch over 2,000 people and make them not dare to act rashly. That was a scene that people didn't dare to imagine. But this was the most realistic portrayal of what happened to the commoners. This was the behavior of the foolish commoners. The way they were educated made them listen to everything that happened. Without anyone leading them, even if they knew that they would die, they would still accept it. They didn't even have the thought of resisting. It really made people angry, and sad. However, this kind of thing wouldn't happen in the future. After becoming a Yangtze citizen, they would be educated and learn how to read and learn. At that time, they would know that people's lives were equal. If others wanted to kill them, they would kill them back. This was a legitimate defense and also a result of human nature. In this way, if someone wanted to harm the Han people in the future, they would have to wait for the countless Han people to stand up and resist them. At that time, even if you were a devil, the commoners would work together to tear you to pieces and defeat you. Back in the real world, Tai Hu and the others started to charge. After the Southern Ming soldiers on the city tower noticed that something was wrong, they started to send troops to attack the city gate. Instantly, gunshots rang out and the soldiers of the South Ming dynasty fell into a pool of blood. When Tai Hu and the others started to charge, Skinny Monkey also came in front of the commoners and said loudly to them, "We are the 5-star army. We are here to save you. In order to survive, please help us open the city gate and welcome the 5-star army into the city. Don't worry, at that time, no one will be able to threaten your lives. As long as your actions are reasonable and legal, you will be the proud Han people in the future. No one will dare to bully you anymore. I can guarantee that." Hearing Skinny Monkey say that he was sent by the 5-star army to save them, there was no need for any guarantees. The commoners all became excited. In the past, there were some rumors about the 5-star army, saying that they were very good to the Han people. If there were people who didn't believe it, when they were defending the city, the 5-star army didn't use cannons to blast open the city gate and injure them. Therefore, at this moment, there was no need for Skinny Monkey to guarantee anything. All of the commoners chose to believe him. What are you waiting for? Open the city gate and let the 5-star army in. Among the commoners, someone finally reacted and shouted. The commoners were like this. Once someone took the lead, they could display unimaginable strength. With everyone working together, the thick city gate was pushed open. At this moment, smoke and dust could be seen rising from the east gate. That was the scene of the 5-star army's cavalry from the north and south of the city. Very good, you have used your actions to save your own lives. You have done very well. However, there are still many commoners like you who are being used at the other 3 city gates. If you are willing, you can come with us to save more commoners. As the saying goes, saving a life is better than building a 7-storied pagoda. Your chance to accumulate good karma has come. Of course, if you don't want to go, no one will force you. As long as you stay here, your safety will be guaranteed. Skinny Monkey was still using his words to encourage the commoners. This was because this step was the first step for them to change. Under Skinny Monkey's persuasion, and with the thought that saving people could accumulate good karma, the main reason was that many of the commoners' relatives were still at the other city gates and they indeed needed their help. Therefore, this suggestion quickly gained the support of most of the commoners. At this moment, more and more commoners responded, and Skinny Monkey's team continued to expand. Good, then everyone get ready. When the main cavalry of the 5-star army enters the city, we will go to the other city gates. At that time, how many commoners we can save will depend on you. Skinny Monkey was very satisfied with the commoners' performance and immediately grinned. In front of the city gate, Tai Hu led 7 small teams to snipe the South Ming army coming down from the top of the city gate. Those who were able to join the Wolf Fang special forces and pass the assessment were all very skilled. As for the marksmanship, it was the focus of their training. Not all of them were sharpshooters, but they were not far from it. When they unleashed their godly spear techniques, none of the southern Ming soldiers who rushed down the city walls were able to escape. They were all shot to death. Thousands of people rushed down continuously, but none of them could reach the city gate. The general guarding the east city was finally afraid. He no longer sent people to attack the city gate. Instead, he lit up a thick smoke and began to warn them. At this moment, countless cavalry soldiers of the First Army entered the city through the east city gate. At this point, the scales of victory began to tilt. Bai Kuan was still watching the performance of the 5-star army on the west city gate tower. When he saw the cavalry of the 5-star army constantly moving and the ground rumbling, he had already changed from the initial fear to the current calm. Chapter 16:13. In his opinion, this was simply the 5-star army's bluff. If they really had such strength, they would have charged into the city a long time ago instead of lingering here from morning to noon. It was as if they had nothing to do. Lord! Lord, thick smoke, thick smoke. A guard casually looked back out of boredom and saw the thick smoke rising from the east gate. Then, he exclaimed out loud. What thick smoke? Seeing how unsettled his guard was, Bai Kuan showed a disdainful expression. He was already thinking of kicking this person out of the guard team. After all, if he wanted to follow his own people, he needed to be calm because he was a hero of the Southern Ming dynasty. As he spoke, Bai Kuan also turned around and saw the thick smoke rising from the east gate. At this moment, he completely forgot what it meant to be calm. He just stood there with his mouth wide open. He didn't know what to do. Wasn't there no 5-star army outside the east gate? Why is there smoke rising all of a sudden? What is going on? Could it be that someone had mistakenly lit the smoke signal? As soon as this idea came out, it was directly rejected by Bai Kuan. Even if there was a mistake, it should have been extinguished immediately instead of letting the smoke get bigger and bigger. In this case, there could only be one result. The east gate was in danger, and it might have been breached by the 5-star army. What's going on? Where did the main force of the 5-star army come from outside the east gate? How did they attack the city? Why didn't we hear the sound of cannons? As soon as he opened his mouth, he asked a series of questions. But regarding all this, no one knew what was going on, so naturally, no one could answer Bai Kuan's question. Report. Fortunately, it didn't take long before a scout from the city rushed to Bai Kuan's feet. What the hell happened? Tell me. Bai Kuan grabbed the scout's collar and asked with red eyes. Reporting to the general. That scout was also shocked by Bai Kuan's words. However, he still replied instinctively. The 5-star army suddenly appeared in the city and attacked from the inside. Now that the main force of the 5-star army has entered the city, all the city gates have become dangerous. General, please send reinforcements. When the scout's reply entered Bai Kuan's ears, he shook his head in disbelief. Impossible. How could there be 5-star army reinforcements in the city? Didn't we check it before? Where did they come from? Huh? Bai Kuan found it hard to believe the truth in front of him. If someone were to tell him right now that the 5-star army's reinforcements had flown over while his attention was focused on the cavalry below the city walls, he would definitely not believe it. But now, regardless of whether he believed it or not, things had already happened. What he needed to do now was to send reinforcements. But the problem was, if he were to face the 5-star army head-on, would his 30,000 South Ming soldiers really be a match? If he was an opponent, why would he threaten the commoners to become human shields? Although he knew that the possibility of them being a match wasn't high. But at this moment, he had no other choice. Bai Kuan waved his hand and said with the attitude of a general who wouldn't return, "Leave a portion of you to guard the west side of the city. The rest of you, follow me down the city walls. We will work together to chase the 5-star army out of the city." Chasing them out was a lie. The real thing was to find a chance to escape. Because when Bai Kuan said this, he didn't have the confidence to do it. The soldiers below didn't know the truth. They only saw that even the general was going to get on the horse, and they were all encouraged. Thinking that the city was still their territory, they all shouted and followed Bai Kuan down the city walls. The 5-star army's cavalry entered the city. Leading them was a division commander, Temu. He had quite a bit of experience, and most importantly, his horse riding skills weren't bad. After entering the city, he led the cavalry and started to rampage. Whenever they met the South Ming reinforcements, the cavalry would crush the South Ming infantrymen in an instant. After the cavalry charged past, the ground was covered with corpses. The soldiers he brought were all veterans and elites. Furthermore, they were cavalry and had a natural ability to crush infantrymen. There really wasn't anyone who was a match for him. Wherever the cavalry went, the South Ming soldiers would either run away or kneel on the ground in surrender. The world's #1 cavalry was simply too strong. They were so strong that no one was a match for them after entering the city. Under Temu's leadership, they first attacked the North City Gate and defeated the South Ming soldiers there. They opened the city gate from the inside and allowed the soldiers of the 2nd Division to enter the city. Following this, the 2nd Division headed straight for the South City Gate while Temu led his troops to the West City Gate. As the saying goes, enemies are bound to meet. Before they charged far, they saw a group of South Ming soldiers coming from the West City Gate. The general leading them was General Bai Kuan, who had just been appointed as Guangxi's left envoy. From afar, Bai Kuan also saw Temu. However, he didn't recognize him. Seeing that he was wearing a general's armor, he only thought that he was an ordinary general. Bai Kuan, who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to kill his way out, naturally wouldn't avoid anyone. He needed to kill his way out. TSK, come and die. Facing the 5-star army that didn't have any firearms, Bai Kuan was still confident. After all, he was personally appointed as the Guangxi Great General by Zhu Huitu. "You are Bai Kuan?" On the other hand, Temu recognized the general immediately. This was also because before the battle, someone had drawn a portrait of Bai Kuan. It was precisely because he had seen it that he recognized Bai Kuan. He was a little surprised. He was surprised that Bai Kuan recognized him. However, at this moment, he definitely wouldn't back down because of this reason. On the contrary, he waved his spear and charged forward. Who cared how this person recognized him? He would kill him first. Good timing. Temu wasn't disappointed that Bai Kuan didn't respond. He only needed to know that Bai Kuan's identity was very important. Holding his scimitar, Temu began to speed up. It was precisely because he knew Bai Kuan's identity that Temu didn't dare to be careless. Before he attacked, he had already made sufficient preparations. His other scimitar was ready to be unsheathed at any time. On the other hand, Bai Kuan's fighting strength was weaker than Temu's to begin with. In addition, he had underestimated his opponent. He didn't think that his luck would be so bad that he would randomly encounter a famous general in the 5-star army. Therefore, when he attacked, he held back 30% of his strength so that he could charge forward later. After all, he didn't know how difficult the road ahead would be. If he used up all his strength right away, what would he do in the future? Just like that, one held back 30% of his strength while the other used all his strength. Originally, the strength of both sides wasn't equal. The strong were stronger and the weak were weaker. After just one exchange of blows, Bai Kuan knew that he had made a big mistake. The spear and scimitar collided. In that instant, a huge force was transmitted through his arm. It also caused Bai Kuan's entire body to tremble. His right hand that was holding the weapon almost lost its strength and threw it away. When an expert showed his hand, it was obvious whether he was skilled or not. After knowing Teimu's strength, Bai Kuan decided to use all his strength to deal with him. At the same time, he secretly cursed his bad luck. How could he meet such a fierce general so casually? However, it was obviously a little too late for Bai Kuan to get serious. Teimu, who had gained the upper hand in one move, laughed heartily and waved his left hand. The scimitar quickly drew a gust of wind and slashed across Bai Kuan's armor. With one slash, the armor was split into two. At the same time, blood and flesh were drawn out. It was just one slash. If it wasn't for the armor protecting his body, Bai Kuan's body would have been split into two. Ayaya. Bai Kuan involuntarily cried out when he felt the intense pain in his chest. He then turned around and tried to leave. Beside him, a few of his personal guards rushed over on their horses in an attempt to save their master. The bodyguards weren't slow. However, compared to the soldiers of the world's #1 cavalry army, they were much slower. These soldiers seemed to have expected something would happen. Without waiting for the bodyguards to rush over, they rushed out and blocked the path of the bodyguards. Taking this opportunity, Teimu chased after Bai Kuan. Just as Bai Kuan turned his horse around, a slash of his scimitar came towards him. Bai Kuan didn't expect that he would be hit again. His arm was hit once more, and he fell from his horse as a result. Save the general. When the bodyguards who didn't have horses saw this scene, they quickly rushed forward and blocked Teimu with their lives. Then, under the protection of the bodyguards, Bai Kuan, who was covered in blood, led the infantrymen behind him and kept retreating. Take the small path. Although Bai Kuan had been slashed twice, he was still conscious. After that exchange, he saw the power of the 5-star army's cavalry. He knew that it wasn't realistic to escape by the main road. The only way was to rely on everyone's familiarity with the terrain of Nanning Prefecture and take the small paths to shake off their pursuers. The South Ming army was retreating while blocking the enemy. Along the way, they left behind more and more corpses. Hence, Bai Kuan was getting further and further away from Teimu. He was now 70 steps away. Let's stay. Seeing the fat meat in his hands trying to slip away, how could Teimu agree? If he really let the target escape, who knew how the other division commanders would laugh at him when he returned? He took out the Big Dipper crossbow from his back and pulled the bowstring. The Big Dipper crossbow was the exclusive weapon of the world's #1 army. Because the materials used to make it were expensive, it wasn't easy to make. Hence, the only army that could use it was the world's #1 army. When the Big Dipper crossbow was taken out, the so-called South Ming army became a target that couldn't withstand a single blow. Faced with the crossbow that could fire 7 arrows at a time, and the speed at which the arrows were loaded and loaded was extremely fast, a large number of South Ming soldiers fell in just 2 waves of attacks. Chapter 16-14. Some of them had already become corpses, while others had knelt down and surrendered out of fear. This caused Teimu to have no obstacles in his way. With a loud laugh, Commander Teimu leapt out on his horse and headed straight for the injured Bai Kuan. The 5-star army's cavalry entered the city, which meant that Nanning Prefecture had fallen. When the 4 city gates opened from the inside, countless commoners erupted with their strength, knocking down the 20,000 Southern Ming soldiers. The strength of the commoners could not be underestimated. It was fine if they didn't erupt, but once they did, the shocking strength they released would leave people speechless. Thus, Nanning Prefecture fell. The pitiful Bai Kuan was first captured alive by Teimu due to his injuries. After a simple bandage, he was tied to a pillar in front of the city square. Countless commoners swarmed over. The timid ones were allowed to throw rotten eggs or green vegetables at Bai Kuan's body. The more daring ones directly spat at him. There were even some who urinated on him on the streets. As for the more daring ones, they used sharp daggers to slice off Bai Kuan's flesh under the supervision of the 5-star army soldiers. This was a punishment worse than death by 1,000 cuts. All of this was because Bai Kuan wanted to force the commoners into a state of certain death. Now, retribution had arrived. If he had known that this would happen, he would not have chosen to use the commoners as a human shield even if he was beaten to death. Afterwards, when Bai Kuan's matter was intentionally spread to the various prefectures of southern Ming, all of the generals fell silent. They originally thought that the 5-star army's slogan of loving the commoners was a weakness that could be used against him. If they did it well, they might be able to turn defeat into victory. But now, Bai Kuan had done this. Not only had he died without a burial place, but even his family had not received any benefits. All of them had died. With this living example in front of them, they could not help but learn from it. They did not want to become the second Bai Kuan. As for how the 5-star army appeared in the city, this matter became a mystery and many people had a question mark in their hearts. Nanning House was taken down. As the capital of Guangxi, this had a huge meaning and alerted the South Ming troops in the other provinces. Right now, no one doubted whether the 5-star army would be able to conquer Guangxi. What they were thinking about was whether the 5-star army would continue to expand after conquering Guangxi. This was something that everyone was concerned about. Time passed day by day. After Bai Kuan was killed and Nanning Prefecture was broken through, the other prefectures in Guangxi all surrendered, to the extent that the world's 1st Cavalry Army, Cold Front 2nd Division, and Russia's 1st Division had no choice but to fight on different fronts. However, even if they split up their forces, their progress was still very fast. Without encountering any tough battles, the 5-star army's vanguard would often open their doors and surrender. Just like this, in less than a month, the entire Guangxi region was under the influence of the 5-star army. Yang Chendong had also achieved his goal when he first came to Yunnan House, which was to completely control Yunnan, Guizhou, and Guangxi. In the 6th month of 1467 AD, when everyone's attention was on whether the 5-star army would continue to expand, Commander Xiao Feng's 2nd Division suddenly went south from Guangxi's Lianzhou Prefecture. With the firearms in their hands, in a short 10 days, they took down Guangxi's Gaozhou Prefecture and Laizhou Prefecture. This action shocked Guangdong's chief minister Yang Xian, who had been paying attention to the 5-star army. Previously, his staff had made many hypotheses, but they did not think that the 5-star army would make a move on Guangdong. This sudden action made Yang Xian feel somewhat at a loss. Afterwards, he anxiously called for a meeting of Guangdong's rank 4 civil and military officials to discuss a solution. In the meeting, everyone was arguing incessantly. Some people felt that the 5-star army was not to be trifled with. If they rashly attacked, not only would they have no chance of winning, it would also easily drag the entire Guangdong region into the flames of war. In the end, they would follow in Guangxi's footsteps. If that happened, everyone would be sinners. There were also people who felt that it was fine to attack, but they had to obtain the emperor's orders. Otherwise, they would be acting without a valid reason. If the 5-star army only wanted to take over these 2 prefectures and did not intend to start a war on Guangdong, then if they took the initiative to attack, wouldn't they be forcing the 5-star army to make a decision? After all, there was news from the front lines that the 5-star army wanted to take over Laizhou Prefecture because it was close to the sea. It was convenient for the 5-star army to transport supplies to the 3 provinces. This was a bit forced. Taking over other people's land to transport supplies was a bit too much. However, in the end, who asked the 5-star army to be so strong? This method was not reasonable, but it was somewhat reasonable. There were also people who wanted to directly attack back. The people who made this suggestion were mostly generals with lower statuses. They felt that the 5-star army taking over Gaozhou and Laizhou was already a provocation to the entire southern Ming Empire. If they did not attack back, where would their face be? Facing all kinds of thoughts, there was still no final decision even when the sky turned dark. Yang Xian could only announce the end of the meeting and return to his own residence's backyard. It must be said that this was a place that he often appeared in recently. The reason why he often came here was because there was an extremely important person living in the courtyard. Usually, when Yang Ding wanted to enter, he had to report his arrival. But this time, he didn't care so much. He directly broke in with a few servants and saw Minister Xia Chongshu, who was writing memorials in the room. Xia Chong, Minister of Rights of the Southern Ming Empire. A month ago, he was ordered by Emperor Zhu Qizhen to Guangxi to prepare to negotiate with Bugnam of Guozhouzian. But no one knew that Xia Chongshu was very afraid of death in his bones. There were no more records of this person in history. Only some unofficial records recorded that he was once a grand scholar, but his ranking was not very high. The reason why he was able to become the Minister of Rights was because there was no one in the Southern Ming Empire. In addition, he was willing to give money to those eunuchs. Because he was afraid of death, Xia Chong walked slowly the entire way. As a result, he only arrived at the capital of Guangdong province 10 days ago. When he arrived, there was already news that the five-star army had taken over the entirety of Guangxi. Xia Chong was unable to accept this result. Didn't he receive a report from the imperial court a while ago that Baikuan had built a human wall in Nanning and blocked the advance of the five-star army? However, how long had it been? How could the entire territory be taken over by the five-star army? Since Guangxi was gone, Xia Chong's mission was also gone. He quietly entered Sir Yang Fu's residence without alerting anyone. From his point of view, it was very likely that the imperial court would send a new decree. At that time, he could return to the capital and leave this dangerous place. However, who would have thought that the five-star army would take an inch and want a mile? Not only did they take over Guangxi, they even sent troops to occupy Gaozhou and Laizhou. This was not something that the Southern Ming Empire could tolerate. Thus, he wrote another letter to the imperial court and waited for the new decree. Others did not know that Xia Chong had come to Guangdong, but as the host, Yang Xian, was very clear. Xia Chong lived in the backyard of his residence. If he wanted to see him, he could do so after notifying him. Tonight, he suddenly barged into the courtyard because he wanted to ask what the emperor and the imperial court were thinking. Facing the aggressive five-star army, whether they wanted to fight or make peace, they had to give an explanation. "You're here. Have a seat." Xia Chong did not care about Yang Xian barging in at night. This was someone else's residence. If they wanted to come in, they could come in. Why would they need his permission? Not to mention, he also had some things to say to Yang Xian. "Lord Minister, the situation outside is very chaotic. It is very difficult for me." After sitting down, Yang Xian began to complain. I know. Lord Yang, don't worry. I have already sent an urgent letter to the imperial court. I believe that there will be a reply soon. Don't worry. Xia Chong was already panicking. However, in order to stabilize the morale of the soldiers and the people, he pretended to be comforting. Hearing that the letter had been sent, Yang Xian's expression became much better. Presumably, the imperial court would not blame him for losing Gaozhou and Laizhou after knowing that the five-star army had sent out such a powerful force. If that was the case, it would be much easier to deal with this matter. At this moment, he was also grateful that Minister Xia Chong was here. At least, his position was not the highest. If something really happened, he would not have to take the blame. Although his mood became better, it was impossible to say that he was completely at ease. After all, he was the chief minister of Guangdong, the highest-ranking official here. If something happened in Guangdong, Xia Chong would be punished. He would not be any better. Since there were no outsiders here, Yang Xian could ask some probing questions. "Minister Xia, you see that the five-star army doesn't care about anything. Shouldn't we also do some defensive work? For example, the teaming guard is not far from Gaozhou. Can we order them to prepare for battle in advance?" Yes, Xia Chong said after thinking for a moment. Before receiving a new decree from the imperial court, no one knew what the emperor's decision would be. If the emperor decided to fight and he did not make any preparations, wouldn't he be delaying the important matter? He could not bear this responsibility. However, preparations were still preparations. After thinking for a while, Xia Chong said, "Lord Yang, you can order the Guanghai Guard to make appropriate preparations. However, you must remember that if the 5-star army does not intend to continue east, do not take the initiative to provoke them. Violators will be punished according to military law." Chapter 16:15. Understood. This was also what Yang Xian wanted to say. He did not want the 5-star army to attack because of his wrong decision. If that happened, there was an 80% chance that the Guangzhou prefecture would follow in the footsteps of the Nanning prefecture. The problem was, after the 5-star army conquered Guangxi, would they continue to attack the east and conquer Guangdong? The answer was in Yang Chendong's heart: they would not. There were many reasons why they would not do so. For example, they did not have enough excuses, they did not have a good reason to attack, the current southern Ming was quite strong, and if they continued to fight, both sides would suffer losses, etc. Ultimately, Yang Chendong, or Yang Xia and the 5-star army, were not fully prepared. 6 years ago, because Yuandong province was attacked, Yang Chendong personally led the army and fought until now. The results of these 6 years were so great that it completely exceeded Yang Chendong's expectations. Before this, he wasn't mentally prepared for this. Even if they conquered 3 provinces this time, it was because of Zhu Huihua's provocation. Otherwise, Yang Chendong would have returned to Qiqian City to rest. The situation was already beyond his expectations. The management staff could not keep up, and the army also needed to rest after a long battle. If he wanted to attack southern Ming, he did not know how much military resources and supplies he would need. Before all of these were prepared, Yang Chendong wanted to stop here. Of course, if southern Ming took the initiative to provoke him, then he would not be polite. If he didn't have enough management personnel, he could just use the old people from the southern Ming Empire. Then, when there were new people, he could slowly replace them. Although doing this would cause instability in the rear, Yang Chendong wouldn't admit defeat when facing the southern Ming Empire's army. As for conquering Gaozhou and Laizhou, Yang Chendong really wanted to open up a sea supply route. In this way, all kinds of military supplies could enter the 3 provinces faster, and it would play a great role in stabilizing the situation. With such benefits, he had no choice but to do it. As for whether this would cause the southern Ming Empire to be disgusted or even take the initiative to send troops, Yang Chendong didn't want to think too much about it. What's the matter? You guys didn't care when Zhu Huiqiang sent troops to Langsun. You guys even supported Zhu Huiqiang with cannons. You even let Wang Mubin of Shiping deal with me. Taking down these 2 houses would be considered as interest. That was what Yang Chendong thought. After allowing Xiao Feng to take down Laizhou Prefecture, he ordered Ling Feng and the 2nd Division to build a port to receive the resources from Qiqian City. He himself was waiting for the southern Ming Imperial Court to send someone to negotiate with him. Although there was a southern Ming envoy named Zhou Xiang in the Nanning Prefecture, Yang Chendong wasn't going to talk to him. This person's rank was too low. He had already received news that Minister Xia Chong had personally come. Since that was the case, it was better to have a chat with this person. Zhou Xiang, who had been neglected, was much more haggard than a month ago. He didn't know what was going on outside. He couldn't sleep well and didn't eat well. He had lost more than 5 kilograms. He had also requested to meet with His Highness Bugnam of Gojoseon more than once. At this moment, he no longer had the arrogance from before. Even when he spoke to a courier, he was very polite. However, even though he was polite, the courier didn't take him seriously. Perhaps it could be said that the order he received was to watch Zhou Xiang and the others. Everything else had nothing to do with him. He had requested for a meeting for several days. In order to achieve his goal, he had even taken out all of his valuables. It was all to curry favor with a courier. However, there was still no progress. At first, he thought that the other party thought it was too little, so he kept increasing the price. However, in the end, he realized that the other party really didn't want to accept it. On this point, Zhou Xiang was filled with emotions. Since ancient times, there had been a saying that there were 7 rank officials in front of the prime minister's door. It was said that the status of a servant was similar to that of the master. When the master was powerful, the small people under him could also benefit and even rise to the heavens. Just like in the current Southern Ming dynasty, many servants of the big families were all arrogant. Sometimes, they could even complete some tasks that only the officials could do. When they returned, they would receive some benefits. This was something that everyone tacitly agreed upon. After all, many things that the master wanted to do required the servants to complete. Why didn't this work in the 5-star army? Just from this small matter, one could see the power of the 5-star army. He couldn't even bribe a small courier. Zhou Xiang didn't know what else he could do. Just like that, the days passed with sighs and sighs. Until one day, Ba Daojiang suddenly appeared in the courier. When Zhou Xiang saw the other party, tears actually flowed out of his eyes. It was as if he had seen his family after many years. At this moment, Zhou Xiang was indeed very emotional. He had finally met someone who kept his word. Assistant Minister Zhou, what happened to you? Could it be that someone mistreated you? Ba Daojiang was also shocked by the tears flowing out of Zhou Xiang's eyes. He instinctively thought that someone had done something unfavorable to the Southern Ming dynasty. No, no. Seeing that Ba Daojiang had misunderstood, Zhou Xiang shook his head and said, "We are very good here. There is enough food and drink, and there is a lot of variety. It is really good." This wasn't to say that Zhou Xiang was flattering, but it was the truth. When it came to food, Yang Shi would never be thrifty or diligent when it came to it. Using a sentence that Yang Chendong once said, if one wanted to change every day, they wouldn't even be satisfied with food. If they couldn't change, then what change was there to change? Oh. Ba Daojiang nodded his head in satisfaction after hearing this. He also didn't believe that someone would dare to do such a thing. The 5-star army rewarded the soldiers with great merits very generously, but at the same time, the punishment for the soldiers who made mistakes was also very severe. It was just like how the soldiers didn't dare to accept Zhou Xiang's money. Because once they accepted it, it wasn't a matter of whether they could keep their money, but whether they could keep their lives. At that time, their family would also be humiliated because of it. Everything was just for a bit of money, but they had to pay such a heavy price. It was no wonder that although the soldiers were tempted, none of them dared to accept the money. Ba Daojiang knew that there wasn't a problem with the treatment, but he was even more curious. Why was Zhou Xiang crying when they met again after not seeing each other for more than a month? Speaking of which, they didn't have much of a relationship before, and this was only the second time they met. Moreover, the experience of meeting for the first time wasn't something that could make one happy, right? How could Ba Daojiang understand Zhou Xiang's emotions? After all, if he hadn't been imprisoned for more than a month, he wouldn't be able to understand that feeling. It was just that the smart Zhou Xiang would not voice out his feelings during this period of time. If he had the slightest bit of resentment, he was afraid that he would provoke the other party and leave in a huff. If that happened, he would not be able to call out to the heavens and the earth. He did not know how long he would have to endure. Not only did he not dare to complain, he also pretended to be fawning and asked, "Sir, is Bugnam of Gojoseon here to see this official?" "Oh, that's not it." Ba Daojiang became more serious when they talked about serious matters. Little did he know that the moment he said this, Zhou Xiang's mood instantly fell to the bottom. If he wasn't here to see him, was he just here to greet him? Or was he here to see if he and the others were dead? Or was he here to end his life? When he thought of the latter, Zhou Xiang's face turned green, then quickly turned pale. It was obvious that he was really afraid. Ba Daojiang saw Zhou Xiang's expression and already guessed what he was thinking. He couldn't help but chuckle and say, "Assistant Minister Zhou, don't think too much. This time, I'm here on Bugnam of Gojoseon's orders to let you and the others go. We've already received news that your Minister of Rights, Xie Chong, has arrived at the Guangzhou government. Since he's here, it's better to let him handle the negotiations. You can go back now and inform Minister Xie to come to the Nanning government. At that time, Bugnam of Gojosian will also arrive at the Nanning government. If there's anything, it's better to discuss it in detail there. After saying this, Ba Daojiang seemed to have thought of something and added, by the way, Bugnam of Gojosian is busy with military affairs and has many things to deal with. Therefore, I hope that Minister Xie can arrive at the Nanning government as soon as possible. If it's too late, I'm afraid that Bugnam of Gojosian won't be able to hold back and continue to mobilize his troops. If that happens, then no one can be blamed. That's enough. I've delivered the message, so I'm leaving. Assistant Minister Zhou, you can pack up and leave with the diplomatic group as soon as possible. Ba Daojiang didn't care about Zhou Xiang's reaction. After saying this, he turned around and left, leaving Zhou Xiang with his back to him. Zhou Xiang stood in the same place for more than 10 breaths. After pondering over Ba Daojiang's words, Zhou Xiang suddenly let out a scream. Then, he shouted, "Hurry, hurry, pack up, we're leaving now, right now." In the three provinces' king's residence, Yang Chendong was talking to Yao Yingjun in the main hall. The entire Guangxi had become one of Yang Xie's territories. Yunnan and Guizhou had begun to stabilize after more than a month of turmoil, so Yang Chendong had no need to stay here. After all, he wasn't Zhu Huiyun, nor was he the three provinces' king. In his eyes, there was only a palm-sized area. He called Yao Yingjun over to listen to his work report and the next step of the work plan. Fortunately, after more than a month of learning, Yao Yingjun had begun to adapt to his current work, and he was getting better and better at it day by day. In front of Yang Chendong, Yao Yingjun roughly explained the plans of the three provinces for the next few years. The main focus was on the migration of the people, distribution of land, and economic development. Chapter 16:16. In the process of listening to the report, Yang Chendong would add some of his own opinions from time to time. Yao Yingjun kept nodding as he listened, and then took notes. Evidently, being able to hear Yang Chendong's direct teachings was something that all of the Yang Xie officials were envious of. It took more than 2 hours for the report to be completed. At the end, Yao Yingjun looked at Yang Chendong and said, "Sixth young master, I have a request that I hope you can agree to." "What is it?" "Tell me." Yang Chendong thought that Yao Yingjun wanted financial support. After all, it was impossible to move without money. "Sixth young master, I would like to send my wife, Zhu Lian, to Qiqian City. As you know, I will have a lot of work to do. I'm afraid that I won't have time to take care of my family in the near future, so." How was this about not having time to take care of his family? Yao Yingjun was basically handing his family's weakness to Yang Chendong. Soon, he would become a high-ranking official in the local government, a high-ranking official with real power in his hands. Moreover, he was so close to the southern Ming dynasty. Who knew how many people would want his position and play tricks behind his back? In order to prevent Yang Chendong from suspecting him, Yao Yingjun decided to send his family to Qiqian City. This way, the trust level would be much higher. For Yao Yingjun to make such a decision, it was enough to prove that he was a smart person. Yang Chendong liked to interact with smart people. This way, he could save a lot of effort. Of course, Yang Chendong was more concerned about old friendships. Ever since Yao Yingjun joined the Yang faction, he had been working in the secret battlefront. It was not easy for him to lead an army privately. Now that he had to send his family away in such a short time, it was too cruel for him. Yang Chendong didn't want to leave an impression that he couldn't tolerate or trust people. Therefore, when faced with Yao Yingjun's request, he only said after a moment of silence, "Zhu Lian doesn't need to go to Crimson City. She has lived here since she was young, and I'm afraid she won't be able to adapt to other places. Without you accompanying her, it would be even more boring. This young master doesn't want to break apart a couple, ha ha ha." Yang Chendong actually refused. Although Yao Yingjun was happy, he was also anxious. This was the time for him to show his loyalty. He could not give up just because of Yang Chendong's rejection. Wouldn't that give others the impression that he was acting? More importantly, he would feel uneasy if he didn't reveal anything that could be used against him. At that time, he was afraid that there would only be other methods to monitor him. That would also be very uncomfortable. As such, Yao Yingjun decided to try again, saying, "Sixth young master, this subject has already discussed this with my wife, and she has agreed. All right, this young master can understand how you feel. However, Zhu Lian and you truly love each other, so it's best that you don't separate. Besides, you're tired from work and need someone to take care of you. How about this? Don't you have 2 children? Send them to Crimson City to study with this young master's princes and princesses. They'll have feelings for each other from a young age, and in the future, they'll be able to help them achieve greater things. Perhaps they'll be even more impressive than you, their father, ha ha ha." He had thought that Yang Chendong had rejected him because he had better methods to monitor him. However, after hearing this, Yao Yingjun's tears immediately flowed out. Even though sending his 2 children to Crimson City was also a form of hostages. However, it was undeniable that this result was much better than sending Zhu Lian over. At least, as Yang Chendong had said, letting the children interact with each other would be very beneficial for the children's development in the future. Yang Chendong had already conquered a lot of land, and there was no need to say anything more. His children would inherit a lot of the family business, and now that they had a good relationship with the future successors, many young Xia generals hoped for this. Now that it had fallen on his head, it would be a lie if he wasn't emotional. Yang Chendong didn't like to see people cry, especially men crying in front of him, so he quickly waved his hand and said, "All right, wipe your tears. If you want to thank the young master, you have to do the work at hand well. If there's anything you can't solve, you can send a telegram at any time. If there's anything disobedient, you can execute it and report it. The young master will support you." This was equivalent to receiving an imperial edict. Yao Yingjun once again prostrated himself on the ground and shouted, "Long live the king." However, everyone knew that it wouldn't take long for this to become 10,000 years. At this time, Yang Xia was so big that it had far surpassed the Great Ming. If Yang Chendong didn't become an emperor, the people below would probably be unhappy. Yao Yingjun left with a grateful expression, and it was time for Yang Chendong to leave Yunnan. Immediately, 2,000 black cavalry followed to protect them, and the Third Army's commander, Wu Sheng, personally led the troops to escort them. The group left Yunnan Prefecture and went straight to Nanning Prefecture. When Yang Chendong left the city, all the people in Yunnan Prefecture moved out. They came out of their own accord to send Yang Chendong off. It was because of this person's arrival that the people's lives had undergone earth-shaking changes. Not only did they no longer need to worry about war and personal safety, but everyone was also given a new piece of land and had a goal in life. This was something that many people had never dreamed of. Riding on the white dragon and looking at the scene of the people sending him off, Yang Chendong said emotionally to Yao Yingjun, who was sending him off, "Did you see that? Those who win the hearts of the people win the world. As long as the hearts of the people are there, there's nothing that can't be done. You local officials and officials must remember this." "Yes, this subject will remember." Yao Yingjun replied as if he had been taught something. Nanning Prefecture. Commander Tian, who was riding a horse outside the city. There were several teachers with him. They all knew that the 6th young master would visit Nanning Prefecture today. For this, not only did they clean up the city again, they also sent many cavalry to protect him. Today, the importance of Yang Chendong's safety was far greater than that of the Emperor of Southern Biming. There were many Nanning people in the welcoming team. They stood on both sides of the road either out of curiosity or out of gratitude. Without the Wolf Fang special forces sent by Yang Chendong, all the people would have been killed by the cannons. Just based on this point, it was worth everyone coming out of the city to welcome Bugnam of Gojoseon. There was another group of people in the crowd. There were many of them, about 1,000 people. They were wearing the Southern Ming official uniform that was somewhat out of place. They were the southern Ming officials led by the southern Ming Minister of Rites, Xie Chong. After Zhou Xiang was allowed to leave Yunnan Prefecture, he rushed all the way to Guangzhou Prefecture and met the Minister of Rites, Xie Chong. After repeating the words of Biyao River, Xie Chong could no longer remain calm. He left Guangzhou Prefecture overnight and went straight to Nanning Prefecture. Xie Chong couldn't guess whether Yang Qindong would continue to send troops or not. However, he definitely couldn't allow the 5-star army to send troops because of him. If he really did that, he was afraid that the emperor would be furious. He only had one head, and it wouldn't be enough to chop it off. After rushing for a while, he finally reached Nanning Prefecture before Yang Qindong. Xie Chong was smart enough not to enter the city. In order to express his attitude, he decided to wait here for Yang Qindong to enter the city first. Although it was said that Yang Qindong already had the intention of lowering his head, but thinking about it, Yang Qindong was Wu Nan Wang, who was recognized by the 2 emperors of the Great Ming Dynasty. It was not a big deal for a subject to be respectful to a king. Jianghu and the others could understand why Xie Chong would appear here. Especially when they saw that the Minister of Rites, who was so high and mighty, had to respectfully welcome their king at this moment, they felt even more honored. Didn't this also prove that the strength of the 5-star army was constantly rising? As everyone was looking forward to it, a black shadow finally appeared in the distance. Then, one after another, the bright 5-star army flag could be seen. It's Bugnam of Gojoseon. Everyone, line up. Tianhu saw that the troops were getting closer and closer, so he hurriedly shouted. This time, because Division Commander Xiao Feng was in Liezhou Prefecture supervising the construction of the harbor, he didn't rush to Nanning Prefecture. Thus, he became the boss here. If something went wrong, he would have to bear the main responsibility, so he couldn't help but be careful. Fortunately, the elite warriors of the world's #1 cavalry army were arranged everywhere, so safety shouldn't be a problem. About half an hour later, Yang Qindong's troops finally arrived in front of Nanning Prefecture's west gate. Tian, who had already brought everyone to stand on both sides and saluted to welcome them. At the same time, his eyes were filled with excitement as he looked at Yang Qindong. Although they hadn't been apart for long. Without Yang Qindong's command, the world's #1 cavalry army seemed to have lost its soul and felt all kinds of uneasy. Now that they could fight side by side with the 6th young master, of course everyone was excited. You've all worked hard. Yang Qindong, who was riding on the white dragon, returned a military salute when he arrived in front of Tianhu and the others. Then, his gaze seemed to intentionally look in Xie Chong's direction, but he ignored him and entered the city accompanied by Tianhu and the others. In a distant corner, Vice Envoy Zhou Xiang said excitedly, Bugnam of Gojoseon saw us, he saw us. I know. What are you shouting for? What are you doing? Xie Chong also saw this scene, but he wasn't very excited. On the contrary, he felt that Yang Qindong cared about ignoring him, which made him feel very uncomfortable. However, when he thought about how his strength was inferior, what else could he do besides lowering his head? Finally, Yang Qindong, who was surrounded by people, entered the city. Xie Chong also tidied up his clothes and prepared to enter the city. Just now, not only did he see Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Qindong, but he also saw the might of the world's #1 cavalry army. It had to be said that this cavalry army not only had a large number of people, but they were also skilled in horse riding. Under their control, all the warhorses didn't make any sound, and none of the warhorses jumped out of the formation, which was very terrifying. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.